Morning, everybody. Morning. Welcome to the second day of Hackout. We have an insane lineup today. Thank you so much for joining in. If the audio is good, if you can see me, if you can hear me, please let us know in the comment section. I can see Vikram. I can see Neil. Where is everybody? Where is everybody? Have they not woken up? Manasvi is here. Hello, Manasvi. Kanch is here. Audio seems to be fine. Rachit says audio is good. Awesome. Perfect. Excellent, folks. We have great sessions lined up for you today. We're starting with our CEO, another head out insider, which is Varun, and he'll be speaking about how travel is going to shape up post COVID. Right? There's a lot of insights that um, he has that are a lot more informed, and he'll be able to convey some of those to us. So let's see how that goes. Varun, over to you.
Thanks, Siddharth. Appreciate it. Morning, everybody. Hope the hackathon is going on well and most of you haven't slept, which is the way that it should be. Um, my agenda for today, and I won't take up a tremendous amount of your time, is to talk about travel in the post-COVID era. Since pretty much the world is now being divided in pre-COVID and post-COVID, and so why not the same for travel as well, right? Um, Before we go into the specifics of the segment, one of the things that have been recurring in nature over the last few weeks, even months, I would say for me, has been the number of times that people have come and asked me saying, would you guys continue to still be in travel and continue to, build a business in travel, given everything that's going on? And I have found that question to be surprising at times, annoying at times. But it's been a recurring theme. And I'm assuming that some of you here as well will be wondering the same thing, saying what happens to travel, what happens to head out, what happens to just generally the notion of people going from place A to place B in a manner that is, not restricted, that is safe, that is um, made available, and that is encouraged. So I think the topical nature of this conversation is extremely important. And I'm hoping that one, I'll be able to share some context of why travel matters with or without COVID, and especially in the context of COVID. And then I'll be talking about what that future could look like. It's not like any of us have a crystal, ball that we can gaze into and sort of see what the future would unravel into. But at the same time, there is a tremendous amount of clarity and innovation that's emerging from all parts of the ecosystem in travel that bodes really well for what the future looks like. And the good news for all of us here in this sort of conversation is that technology seems to be the key enabler and the key sort of focal point of what's going to make travel great again, to borrow a few lines from the great Dolan. So, in that context, without wasting any more time, I'll sort of get started with what I have to share with you. If any of you have questions along the way, then there'll be a segment at the end where you guys can ask me whatever it is that you want to ask. It doesn't matter if it's specific to head out or if it's sort of a more generic question connected with the ecosystem of travel itself. Anything and everything is something that I would love to answer. So looking forward to that, and we'll get going right now with whatever information that I have for you to share, that I have to share with you. Okay, I think you guys should be able to see my screen. Awesome. So when we started Head Out, right? And I'm not sure how many of you are aware of the slightly crazy story that we had at the very beginning. I'm assuming Vikram and Rachit and all of them would have shared tidbits of this with you. Um, but I guess that makes for a conversation on another day. I'll not bore you with the details there. But when Vikram, Suren, and I came together, what was abundantly clear to us was, whatever that is that we wanted to build, we wanted to be clear about the reason as to why we are building what we are building, right? And that why mattered more than anything else to us in the world. Uh, the reason why that why mattered was also because we believed that when we started Head Out, and we still do till this date, that what we do here, the work that we'll put in here over the next few years, is going to potentially be the defining work of our lives. And given the importance that that holds in our own context of our lives, we were very mission driven as founders, and we still are from day one. And so, when we sat down and we discussed about what is that why, and what is the reason as to why we want to do what we are doing, it took us a while. It took us about a couple of weeks of conversation, but sort of here's what we dwelled it down to, right? Our mission is and will always be to unlock a significantly happier world than what we inherited, which is all about connecting amazing in-person experiences with people all over the globe, right? And what we really sort of mean when we say in-person experiences, there are different definitions and types of experiences that people talk about. The one that we really care about, and the one that we are extremely passionate about, is experiences where people come together, right? People of different backgrounds, from different nationalities, from different um, understandings, from different thought processes, the amalgamation of those set of people coming together and congregating in a manner that allows them to exchange their ideas, their opinions, their inspiration, is really what the crux of what we define and what we believe in as experiences. And so the mission is about unlocking this happier world, where we are able to connect these people together through the medium or through the format of these experiences. And in the process of doing that, in the along the journey, the hope and the fight is that we'll be able to entertain, educate, and inspire people, right? And if we are able to do all three of them, then the final outcome of sort of unlocking that happier world is going to manifest itself sooner than later. And so that's the mission that we are on, right? Now the question that kind of pops in my head when I talk about this mission is that why exactly is travel considered to be important? And in some of the conversations that I've had with people, especially sort of um, from parts of India, or from people coming in from a non-travel background where they haven't spent a lot of time thinking about the ecosystem in itself, the question always pops as to why exactly is travel important? How important is it? And what does it really mean for the world? So before we get into what travel could look like, I think it's imperative to set the stage for why travel matters, right? And that's exactly what I'm going to do using three different factoids. I've always loved factoids. I'm a enthusiast quizzer. I used to quiz quite, vociferously when I was in college, and so I've always loved to do this. We've, carried over this tradition here out as well. Some of you may know this, may not know this, but every few months we conduct quizzes, which is a bit of a head out tradition, and something that I sort of hold very dear to my heart. So, anyways, the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to sort of share three facts with you, and this may or may not have any correlation with the question that I ask at the end of this conversation, which is going to make you eligible for prizes if you get the right answer. So pay attention to what I'm sharing. It may or it may not have any correlation with whatever it is that I'm asking later on, right? So, what is about travel? What is it about travel that makes it so important and so relevant? The first fact, which I think is again not as well known as it should be, is the fact that travel as an ecosystem, as an industry, as a segment is humongous. We are talking about an industry that is close to $9 trillion in terms of total, dollar value that's exchanged hands between people just as recently as 2018, 2019, right? And so that number in itself, and yes, I am talking about a trillion with a T, that number itself should tell you the kind of disproportionate impact it has on livelihood, on GDP, and on the collective prosperity of the world that we live in, right? And so the first thing is just how big it is. And that's why it matters, right? Because anything that is big does matter more often than not. The second fact that is imperative again for us to sort of set context of why travel matters is that it constitutes roughly about more than 10% of all jobs in the world, right? Which means literally 1 in 10 people that you talk to or that you know are getting their livelihood directly or indirectly because of travel. And that's quite crazy. I mean, it's the biggest singular segment or industry in terms of the total number of people that it employs, and anything that enables such a large quantum of livelihood across the world has to be something that is at the front and center of the world's attention in terms of why it matters. And last but not the least, a number that I think perhaps could be surprising is that in total, last year itself, there were close to 1.5 billion people that crossed borders and could be qualified as an international traveler who have crossed borders for more than 24 hours, right? And the reason why this matters is that in a world that we live in today, where restriction in movement of people from one place to another is dictated by rules and quagmiric sort of bureaucratic setups, which most of us do not enjoy or do not subscribe to, it is incredibly, encouraging to see that there were almost 1.5 billion of us that did cross that border in some sense or the other, and rekindle that enthusiasm and that spirit of travel, which is what made humankind the kind of force it is as a species today, right? The fact that we wanted to break the frontiers that were in front of us and explore what's unknown to us is really the reason as to why we are where we are today. And travel is a great manifestation of that spirit that we talk about. And so in total, there were 1.5 billion people that travel in an international context last year. And this doesn't include domestic for sure, right? I mean, if you look at the total quantum of trips that people took, and when I say trip, I'm talking about an activity that people take where they say, hey, listen, I'm going to go out and I'm going to head out and I'm going to do something for more than a 24-hour period, then that quantum comes out to anywhere between 5 to 7.5 billion, depending on the context of the survey that we look at, right? So to people who sometimes question or concern themselves with the size of the problem statement that we are handling, or is this a big enough problem, or are there enough people who travel and who care about this? There are 1.5 billion of them that travel internationally, and there are 4.5, 5 billion plus trips that take place on an annual basis for people to sort of just head out and do something fun, right? So it's a big number, and it means that the work that we do and the work that everybody does in the travel ecosystem has a large impact on these billions and billions of people and trips that there are, right? So those are the three things that I wanted to share with you in terms of why travel matters. Now, when I started this conversation, I talked about the kind of back and forth that I've had with some people over the last few months, where they have literally asked me point blank, saying, "Are you still crazy to continue to build in this ecosystem?" And I guess perhaps all of us are crazy to do this, but in our minds, the reason why we believe that the mission for continuing to build in travel is even more important in the post-COVID context is something very simple, right? Mark Twain was the one who said that travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow mindedness. And I don't need to tell you guys about the world that we're inheriting these days, where restrictions, prejudice, bigotry, narrow mindedness, all of these things are the flavor of the month, right? Or the flavor of the year. And I can't think of a better antidote to that movement that we are seeing, to that close-mindedness of people, than travel, right? It is the one activity that enables people to open up new perspectives. It enables people to uh, share the world that they live in with people that they are not aware of or people that they're not familiar with. And the importance of that phenomenon in itself to us is gravely, gravely important, right? And it's gravely timely as well, because as we sort of continue down this century, if we aren't able to fight these vices that we have in front of us, then I think the century that we live in is not going to be as productive and as amazing as it should be. And so we believe that, especially sort of in the post-COVID context, being able to drive the narrative that travel matters, and it's the best antidote that we have to these vices, is extremely important. And that's what drives the team at Head Out, and not just Head Out, but drives the entire ecosystem of travel, and the billions of people connected with it, to make it matter and to keep working on it, right? Um, the second tangential perspective that we share within Head Out is the fact that as the world gets more and more digital, where most of us are spending time on screens, on Netflix, on our mobile devices, etc., we build connections with people with a format in the middle, which is our digital screen, but we more often than not sort of sense that loss of direct connection between a person, right? Between us and somebody else. And so, in the world that's increasingly digitally proliferated, we believe that Head Out is a hedge against that proliferation, where human experiences and human interactions are still celebrated, um, in person. And so we sort of look at this as a hedge against the evolution of smartphones and digital entertainment and Netflix and so on and so forth, right? Like, we have always sort of positioned Head Out as an antidote or as a hedge against that. So I think these two perspectives, one being the narrow-mindedness of the world that we live in, and second, the digital sort of entertainment proliferation that exists around us, are two reasons as to why building in travel matters, more so today than it ever did, right? Now, coming to what the future looks like, and we have spent an inordinate amount of time in the last few months, trying to sort of measure, trying to predict, trying to talk to our customers, trying to talk to our partners, to try and understand what COVID means for the way that travel happens, right? And of course, COVID is not the first major global disruption that affected the world of travel. We've had major such earlier cases. There was 9/11, which had an impending, lasting effect in some sense. Before 9/11, I'm not sure how many of you travel internationally or even on airports. But I remember in Bangalore, I was able to go to Bangalore airport and go all the way to the viewing deck and see, flights landing and taking off, and be able to say bye to my aunt who was leaving to Singapore at that point in time. And I was a kid about 8, 9 years old. Um, and that was possible in a pre 9/11 world, right? But that wasn't possible in the post 9/11 world, because the amount of security apparatus that took in place, increased by a few orders of magnitude, right? But that does not mean that travel got impacted. In fact, travel as an activity, if you sort of remember the chart that I had shared earlier, in terms of total number of people that were traveling, has only kept increasing even post 9/11. And so the way that people travel and the systems and the processes that people have to go through to travel got they changed, they evolved, but the desire and the willingness of people to travel in itself did not quite change, right? So you had 9/11 as a major disruption, you had the Zika virus, you had SARS as a major disruption, then you had the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, that also did lead to a dip in travel. But you can see over the course of history that whenever you've had such disruptions, it has led to a dip. But then we have evolved, and then we have adapted to the new reality that we live in, and travel has sort of gotten back up in a fairly quick space of time, and continue to sort of march on the inevitable sort of, I would say, outcome, where the outcome that, or the world that we want to live in, is where everybody can travel to wherever they want to, without biases, restrictions, and so on and so forth. So as a result of these conversations, we're trying to sort of figure out what the future looks like, and I have a few perspectives on that. The first perspective that I want to share, is that, and this is something that Bill Gates mentioned back in 2005, 6, if I'm not wrong, where he said that we always overestimate the change that occurs in the next 2 years, and we underestimate the change that occurs over the next 10, right? And we have truly believed this and seen this in action firsthand at Head Out. And so when we future and trying to predict it, we're trying very hard to ensure that we are not biasing our lens with what's happening next to us right now, but we are able to sort of zoom out and look at what happens over the next decade, and trying to see what the world could look like, and then work backwards from there, right? And so the first thing that we can see, is something called revenge travel. I don't know how many of you have heard this term, but given the kind of lockdowns and general restrictions that have come into place because of COVID, the importance of travel as an activity, as a phenomenon to people has been reiterated in a manner that's louder and clearer than it ever was, right? And so the moment that we are able to travel safely again in pockets or otherwise, we believe, and it's quite clear to us, having spoken to our users and also having looked at a whole bunch of surveys, that there's going to be this huge spate of revenge travel where people are going to realize that the time that we have is infinite, the opportunities that we have with us is infinite, is finite rather. And so uh, we need to take these opportunities, we need to take the time that we have in front of us and utilize that for things that matter, right? And so people are going to spend money, time, effort on experiences and on travel than they are on materialistic possessions. And I think that notion or that desire is only being fueled further because of COVID, because it's making us realize what matters and what doesn't. And that bodes really well for what sort of travel holds in the future, right? So I think revenge travel to us is going to be a major theme, and companies and geographies that are able to tap into this revenge, so to speak, are going to do well for themselves versus those who are not. The second thing that we see is future is sci-fi, right? And what I mean by that is that technology is going to be an essential enabler to make travel safe again, right? Whether it is contactless travel, where the amount of interactions that we have with physical spaces and devices and people, um, in places which are not important, like your airports or hotels and so on and so forth, the amount of technology that's currently being deployed to be able to make these spaces safer is not funny, right? And so, in a lot of ways, what COVID has done is it has pulled the world ahead by 10 to 15 years in terms of the technological adoption, specifically within travel. And so, we are seeing innovations like contactless travels, we are seeing innovations like um, protocols being set where there's a clearing system for governments and cities and tourism boards to be able to see, who is coming in, who is going out, what the risk levels are, and being able to take decisive calls as and when they see a risk flare up and do whatever is necessary to be able to mitigate them, right? We're seeing that in our own ecosystem, in experiences, we're seeing our partners, institutions, museums, partners who have been agnostic to technology over the course of the last few decades, really lap this up in ways that we just hadn't anticipated earlier, right? We've had conversations with our partners where they now want to set up time bound reservation systems. Like, for example, if you think about museums earlier, more often than not, you could just walk into a museum as and when you would want to, right? But today that's not possible because now museums need to regulate as to how many number of people are going to be allowed to come into the museum at some point in time, right? Which means that museums now need to build reservation systems that will be able to regulate the crowd flow, which has multiple implications in terms of the reservation systems, the price that you pay for entry at different points in time, which can now be dynamic to match supply and demand more effectively. Um, the kind of technology that you have available inside the venues itself to be able to not have to use an audio guide when you have your own device, right? When you have your own mobile device, which is a supercomputer in all respects, why do you need a separate device to be able to deliver information? Why can't you use your own device and be able to get the kind of context and information that you would need, right? So I think in general, COVID is a welcome break, if I may call it that, to be able to really push forward the agenda of using technology and leveraging technology to be able to make travel more safer, more inclusive, and more interesting, right? Which means that companies like Headout and in general people in this forum, the makers, the hackers, have a significantly important role to be able to build the technology of the future that will help travel continue to make the world a better and a happier place than what it is today. The third thing that we are seeing is that travel is going to become closer and more sustainable. And here's what I mean by that, right? Um, when we talk about travel, we always sort of have fanciful ideas about traveling to Seychelles, traveling to Fiji, traveling to New Zealand, etc., etc., right? But we oftentimes overlook the amazing diaspora of activities, experiences, and things that we have around us, right? And so COVID has forced governments, people to look closer to where they are and indulge in what I would term as more sustainable tourism, where people are spending more time, more money in communities closer to where they are, which of course helps from a long-term perspective, because that nature of travel and that flavor of travel is a lot more beneficial to local communities, is a lot more sustainable from a long-term perspective. And so companies that are able to ensure that their services and their offerings stay relevant from a closer radius perspective, I think are going to do much better in travel than otherwise, right? And so I think in general, travel in the future, I'm not saying that international travel will go away. That's continuing to boom and will boom. I don't doubt that at all. But I think there is going to be a significant amount of renewed interest in short haul domestic travel that's closer home, because I think the total quantum of trips that people take in itself is going to go up, right? We talked about how people have realized that time is finite and they need to, utilize them for experiences. I think a manifestation of that is going to be in terms of the total quantum of short haul frequent trips that we take closer home. And that's going to be an important theme of the recovery that we see in travel. The fourth one is that the bar for what qualifies as an exceptional experience is going to go up, right? And it's going to be more personal than it ever was. Because at the end of the day, I think the era of the large group sized travel that you would see from the likes of Cox and Kings and Make My Trip and Thomas Cook, and I'm sure some of you would have seen these ads, where you travel with 40, 50, 100, 200 people in buses, and that flavor of travel, I think, is probably not going to come back in the same fervor that it was before COVID, right? I think travel is going to be more intimate, it's going to be more personal, and that has ramifications mostly for the good, across the industry. And companies and makers that are better equipped to be able to understand this paradigm shift in the way that consumers look at travel, and are able to come up with solutions that make that travel more personal in itself, are going to do well for themselves. And last but not the least, I think this pandemic has again given us a chance to sort of reflect on what truly matters. And I think what truly matters is being exceptional, right? When I say being exceptional, I talk about being exceptional in terms of the things that we do, being exceptional in terms of the things that we experience. And so, in general, the bar that people will apply to travel is going to go up a few notches, right? People are going to expect a lot more, and people are going to want a lot more. And that means that travel will need to evolve itself, where the customer centricity of the entire industry will need to be further fine tuned and further renewed in a manner where all touch points and all interactions and all experiences that we deliver to people need to not just be good, need to not just be great, but they need to be exceptional, because that's what the need of the hour is, right? And so I think the future is going to be tremendously exciting, because being exceptional is going to be critical and going to be a key testament to that future sort of unraveling the way that it needs to. So, to quickly summarize, I think revenge travel as a theme is going to be massive. I think the future is going to be largely tech enabled. I think the future is going to be manifested into more trips that are closer home. I think the future will look a lot more personal, a lot more intimate than it ever has. I think the future will demand more exceptional travel experiences. So that's our prediction in terms of what travel could look like in the post-COVID world. Um, Having said all of this is only going to be possible if makers and builders like us are building stuff that matters. And so I always sort of talk about how even when COVID happened, even when lockdowns were prevalent all across the world, and even today when lockdowns came into effect in Europe just last week, the only thing that we can do as a group of people is to focus on building exceptional products, exceptional solutions to problem statements, to make sure that the reason as to why travel matters, to make sure that travel as an antidote to the bigotry, the narrow-mindedness, the digital sort of toxicity that we see around us, is taken care of. So that's my clarion call, to go back and to build. And that's what this hackathon is all about. That's what Hackout is all about. So I'm excited to see the kind of products and solutions that you build. It doesn't have to be with travel, but in general, the solution to almost any problem statement in the world is to build. Now, last but not the least, I would love to answer any and every question that you guys have. I know people sometimes don't ask questions because they fear getting judged. There is always that risk, but rewards are meant for people who take those risks. I would love to answer whatever questions that you guys have. But hope that this was insightful, helpful. It gave you a slightly different and a more evolved perspective on travel. And looking forward to seeing the world get back on its feet and us continue to build products that can help them do that.
Yo, Varun, that was super, super sweet. Thank you so much for giving us that introduction to the future of the travel industry. I see from the chat that you've introduced a lot of people to the concept of revenge travel, and there's absolutely been a lot of googling going on, and people seem to be on the same page as you on the idea that revenge travel is going to be the de facto way of travel coming back as an industry post COVID. Waiting for my revenge trip is happening in the chat. Revenge trip OP is happening. Loki want to travel to Vasepur. Amritajit asks, what internet service do you use when traveling? Oh, that's a super super
Relevant.
circumstantial question. Do you have an answer to that, Varun?
Yes, I do. So I always do one thing alone, which is that whenever I travel, as soon as I land at the airport of whichever country that I'm in, I go and buy a local SIM card. And in almost all of the travels that I've done, barring maybe one exceptions, which basically means that that's the exception to the rule, you would be able to find really cheap uh, data from just buying a local SIM card there. And almost always this is available at the airport itself. So I never worry myself about this too much. I just land into wherever I'm supposed to be and I just buy the SIM card, local SIM card, switch my SIM card with the local one, switch on my 4G and live life happily from there on. I have never traveled without internet. Like that to me is a deal breaker. So last trip that I remember taking where there was no internet was Andaman Nicobar, specifically in Havelock and Neil Island. There is only BSNL. There used to be only BSNL in Andaman for reasons that make no sense to me. Thankfully, that's changed. Fiber was just introduced to Andaman. So if anybody is traveling or looking at sort of finding ideas for where they should be for New Year's, then Andaman is a good solution. They just rolled out fiber cables in Port Blair, and they're extending that to Havelock and Neil as well. So check Andaman out. But in general, the answer to that problem statement is that wherever you are, just land at the airport, go to the SIM counter at the airport, buy a local SIM card, and you're sorted.
Awesome. That was super practical. Questions, folks. Chat. There's a lot of OPs happening. Varun meme OP. Wow, people really appreciate the fact that you included so many memes in your presentation.
I mean, a presentation without a meme is like not a presentation in my books, so that goes without saying.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. If I want to buy some tech products from other countries, how must one carry it out so as to get an effective cost? Vishrut Grover asking the right questions.
Dude, so the only thing that I've seen that works, right? I've always bought like almost all of my gadgets whenever I've been in the US or wherever else that's relevant. The simplest solution to that is that one, if you're traveling from India, which I'm assuming most of the audience here are from, then get something called the Neo Global Card, the Neo Forex Card, NIYO. It's the cheapest way to do foreign exchange transactions, which means that you don't need to carry dollars with you. You just need to carry that card and you can load that card if you have internet connection from your Indian account at whatever point of time that you want. And then just swipe it without paying foreign exchange transaction fees on your swipe. So use Neo and buy, if you're buying Apple, for example, which is what I do because kind of an Apple fanboy, so almost all the things that I use are from Apple. I've always bought this from the US. Even within the US, you need to figure out which states is where Apple products are cheapest because the state taxes differ. So that bit of quick Google research should be fine. But in general, just take Neo, go there, swipe it, buy the card, buy the product, and remove the boxes. You start using the product and bring it back as if you just took it with you, and you should be fine. As long as you're bringing back one or two items, which I'm assuming would be the case for most of us, you should be absolutely fine.
Awesome. Wow, these are super, super niche tidbits that we're getting. inside of a hackathon session. Folks, if you've enjoyed this, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let's have Varun OP in the chat.
Apparently, I'm supposed to ask a question which is supposed to, make people eligible for goodies.
Yes.
So let me know
Yeah,
if now is a good time to do that.
absolutely. Go for it, Varun. Go for it.
Okay, so here's a question. Okay, before that question to you, Siddharth, how are the answers supposed to come in? Are people supposed to type it out? What's the format?
Correct. So people will type it out in the chat, and the easiest way for you to vet them would be to open the stream in a new tab and mute it so that the mic doesn't gather all the feedback, and then have a look at the chat.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. So here's what we're gonna do. Um, I try to make this slightly hard because most good things in life are supposed to be that. So the question is this: if you look at countries which are reliant on tourism, right? How would you define that? You would say that the percentage of the GDP of that country that comes from tourism is a good measure of it. The higher the percentage, the more reliant that country or that country's economy is on tourism, right? So what I want you to do is I want you to make a list of three countries in the order of highest to lowest reliance on tourism. So the first one, let's say, for example, if you write first one as USA, that means that you're saying that USA has the most amount of reliance on tourism as a industry, which means the percentage of tourism GDP by total GDP will be the highest, right? And then second is X, and then third is Y. So I want you to write down these answers as 1, 2, and 3, and the answer which is closest to the actual correct answer of the top three economies of the world, which has the highest reliance on tourism as a part of their economy, would basically win that hamper that's on your way from Ekansh and Siddharth. So that's the question. I hope that makes sense. If the question is not clear, then please feel free to ask me what I mean by that. But you essentially need to stack rank the countries with the highest reliance on tourism for their economies in 1, 2, and 3.
Damn, the answers have already started flowing, and people are going nuts in the chat. As soon as Varun OP ended, the answers have started streaming in. You might want to open up the chat and have a quick look.
Yeah, dude. So I'm just gonna quickly do that. So the link is the link on. So that I'll need your help. Why don't you hook me up with the link?
Yeah, sure. All right, the link should be in the Zoom chat.
Yep, I can see it getting there. Okay, and you want me to mute it, which is done, and you want me to look at the. All right. Okay. All right. Some good answers coming in. So Vinamra's answer is Mexico, Spain, and Italy. Anshul's answer is Mexico, Spain, and Italy. USA, Divyanshu's Mexico, Spain, Italy. A lot of Mexico, Spain, Italy. All right. Vinamra's answer is Maldives. So Vinamra has changed his answers along the way. Convenient. We totally know what happened there, Vinamra. Manasvi's answer is Maldives, British. Maldives, Singapore. I would say Macau, Maldives, and Singapore, Hong Kong to actually Maldives, Spain, Italy. All right, guys. So some of the answers sort of along the way got significantly better as people realized the trick here. Typically, countries which are smaller and which have a significantly high, which are known as tourism hotspots, are the ones that would essentially qualify. The number one answer on the list is Macau, which I'm sure by now people have sort of got to Googling. I'm going to basically give the benefit of doubt and give the results to the person that gave the answer or the closest to the right answer as early as possible, which essentially means that it is going to be. I'm going to cancel Vinamra's answer here because I think that Vinamra sort of got it wrong and then right later on. So Vinamra, too
Yeah.
fucking bad. Manasi's answer also I'm going to cancel because it's too specific. So it is Google. I can guarantee that. Aramji, Vishrut, Maldives, Singapore, and British. I need to essentially be like the headmaster here trying to figure out who has not copied. let me see who seems the most legitimate here. Vishrut's answer seems legitimate. Macau, Maldives, and Singapore, which is pretty close to what the actual answer is. Macau, Maldives, and Seychelles also actually is a very good answer. Countries which are smaller must be the answer to Macau, Maldives, and Hong Kong. Yeah. All right, cool. I don't know how many gifts that we have to give, guys. But if I have to pick, and it's a subjective pick, but as they say, the quiz master is always right. If you have participated in any quizzes, and I'm the quiz master, so I get to make that pick. I would pick Vishrut as number one, and I would pick Sridhar as number two, if there is a number two at all. So yeah, Vishrut and Sridhar, congratulations. You guys cracked this right closer than most people did.
Awesome,
Hopefully without cheating.
awesome. Congratulations, Vishruth and Sridhar. Folks, if you enjoyed that, do leave a like, do subscribe to our channel. Varun is actually one of the top 35 young leaders in travel as per Focusrite. And in fact, even prior to startups, he had like this brief stint at the dark side at Goldman Sachs. And after his bachelor's in business, he never actually found the time to study further, leading him down this rabbit hole of travel and building a whole company around it. And he's done absolutely fantastic so far. Thank you so much for coming on, Varun. It was a fun talk, and a lot of people have done a lot of Googling since you started speaking. So that's always good to see.
Thank you so much, guys, for having me, and looking forward to seeing some great products and great solutions come out of the Hackout.
Awesome. Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
There's a bunch of activity happening in the chat. Let's just quickly have a look. Oh, it started with Sid OP. Thank you so much, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much, everybody, for liking and subscribing. Although I see that the number of people watching is much higher than the number of likes this video has. I wonder why that is. Guys, YouTube algorithm is actually really smart in recommending things to most people, but we can actually train it by liking and sharing all of these streams. So if we want to show the people of YouTube that we're having a lot of fun here, let's all like the video and share the link with all of our friends, have them come on board, listen to all of the super niche tidbits that Varun occasionally gives out. And let's definitely move on to our next speaker, who's Sudhanshu Shekhar. Sudhanshu is a volunteer at Product Nation and iSpirit. He's one of the minds behind a lot of digital public goods in India, such as UPI and DigiLocker, that are two of his most biggest projects. And the most recent one being an open credit enablement network that seeks to build a standardized API layer between lenders and loan marketplaces. He's previously been a product manager at Zeta and was also a Hackout insider at one point. And today he's going to tell us about how he scales fintech to 1 billion Indian users. So Danshu, are you here?
Hi. Hey, Siddharth.
Hey Sudhanshu.
Hey, Varun.
Can you hear Sudhanshu? Is the audio fine? Can you see him? Let us know in the chat. And Sudhanshu, this stage is all yours. Go for it, man. Best of luck.
Thank you for that kind introduction. One quick check. I was not part of the team that built UPI, but have been part of UPI since it got launched in 2018, I think. Been working on just scaling out and adding in the new features that are part of UPI.
Awesome. That qualifies you as someone I'd like to thank for making all of my Swiggy and Zomato payments a breeze. So thank you for that, Sudhanshu. And let's hear it from you. Go for it.
Okay. Great. So I'm going to be talking about scaling fintech to 1 billion Indians. And the core crux of my talk is basically about how do we cater effectively to a country that's as large and as diverse as India. So India, as we all know, is a very diverse country, and there's a big range of diversity in the population in our country. I mean, as a statistic, about 16 million of the population in the country, or 3 million households, are what we would call as rich people. That is above 17 lakh rupees a year is what they earn. There's about 160 million people who are in the middle class, 359 million, that's around 3.5 crores, who are around the aspirers. This is the lower half of the pyramid. And then about 684 million people in this country are what you will call in the deprived category. That's they earn less than 1.5 lakh rupees in a year. Now, therefore, the average Indian that we have in this country today is typically what we would say is a street vendor in the country, and is earning approximately 20 to 20,000 rupees a month, out of which again the profits are even lower, and they're supporting a family of 4 people. They definitely don't trust technology and the establishment. And so therefore the challenge becomes for all fintechs to actually, how do they effectively cater to this segment? Everybody till date has focused on the top of the pyramid, which is the 16 million population. If you've heard any talk by Kunal Shah, he's very explicit about this idea that India fundamentally is a country where you have a small set of super rich people, and all the fintechs and startups focus on that segment, while tier 2 and tier 3 India continues to be deprived of technology. And so the crux of the question is, what is the problems that are not allowing the private sector or even the government to effectively help this deprived population actually progress? Now, the definition of progress for most people in the world of financial inclusion is going to start by having a bank account, right? You need a bank account where you can deposit funds, you can get interest, you can track your savings. That's the first step. The second step becomes being able to effectively use this bank account to make payments. I mean, the most common behavior in the country today is that you receive your salary or your government benefit into your bank account, you withdraw all the money in cash, and then you start spending cash for any kind of payment. However, the challenge becomes that since you are making all your transactions in the informal sector, there is no data about you as an individual that's available to the lenders or to the wealth advisory or to other segments, so that they can enable you to basically grow as a person, right? The access to credit helps a customer be able to make transactions and buy things today that they would typically be able to afford a year down the line. And actually speaking, credit is prevalent in the country. However, formal sector credit is very, very low. What ends up happening in most cases is people in tier 2 and tier 3 towns trust their families or their friends to get money, or they go to money lenders. And money lending, the loans typically are in the range of 2 to 3% a month. That's about 24% to 36% on an AY basis, which is extremely hard for a lot of these people to repay back. Now, if you just talk about the loan journey of an ideal individual in the country, and specifically picking up the persona of the street vendor that we spoke about, when they need to get a loan, they first of all need to be able to share data that is authenticated, data about your bank account statements or your transactions, and history of basically the aspect of trust that I know this person, and therefore I can give a loan to the person, which is the primary question for any lender in the country, right? And since a bank account or a bank or a lender, an official lender, does not know an individual who primarily transacts in cash, they are unable to extend a loan offer, or if they do so, it's at a very, very high interest rate. So if you were to imagine for 2 seconds the future, wherein you have a very ideal scenario, and this person, Rajni, wants to take a loan, she should be able to basically share her data with one or more lenders, be able to get loan offers from each of these different institutions, be able to select, I want a loan from SBI, I might want a loan from Bajaj for different financial products, be able to digitally receive this loan into her bank account, use this loan to buy goods that she wants to sell on that day, and then be able to repay the loan by the end of the day. So the whole goal here is to digitize what happens very commonly in the informal sector, and is often referred to as a Sindhi loan, wherein the street vendor basically goes in the morning, takes a short loan from a banker, from a local money lender, buys goods, sells them during the day, repays back that loan, and goes back home. This small ticket size loan is not catered to by the formal financing sector or any fintech in the country. Most people have a 30-day, 90-day, or a year-long lending cycle, and therefore the Rajnis of the world are forced to bank on these loan sharks or local money lenders. Now, sorry, okay, I'll just actually ask my question here once before I move forward. So the question for the audience right now is, what is the average cost, according to you, of issuing a single credit card to a customer in this country? What would it cost a bank to issue a credit card? Uh,
Folks, Sudhanshu has asked his question. Let us know your answers in the chat. Oh, we have some answers coming in already. Vikram says rupee 1. Well, that doesn't sound very convincing, Vikram. Akshay says 500 rupees per annum. 700. Sudhanshu, would you say they're getting closer or are they getting farther?
they're getting closer, but the number is higher.
The number is a lot higher, folks. Sudhanshu is giving you hints. Let's see how quickly we get there. Meanwhile, Sudhanshu, since we have a record of who's posting the answers when, we can always come back and see who is the first one to get the closest. And while we do that, we can continue the session as planned.
Sure, sure. So, okay, I'll leave that question out for people to answer. The cost we're talking about is the end-to-end cost of onboarding the customer with a credit card instrument. So, except for the marketing costs, basically everything around the OPEX. Okay, I'll just repeat the question again. What is the cost of issuing a credit card to a bank like HDFC, not including the marketing costs, but starting from the point wherein I, as a customer, ask the bank, either the branch or online, for getting a credit card. I want a credit card right now from HDFC, let's say Diners Black. And then I go through the process of the whole application. What is the cost that is involved in this on an average credit card product? Okay, so coming back to the presentation, now we've seen that the financial journey that is needed to cater to a single loan for one person, who is a street vendor and an average Indian per se, requires all of these steps to happen, right? All of the steps around data sharing, being able to explain to them what is the offer that I want as a lender to share with them, and then from there moving forward to accepting the best loan offer, and then just one sec, sorry. Yeah. So all of these steps are involved in the process of getting a loan. Now you can cater to this thing. You can cater to this effectively in two ways, and most countries are doing these two ways. One is the old school solution of having a central bank or a regulator. Built on top of it, you have clearing houses such as NPCI in the country, and then you have banks. And in a typical way, which most countries in the world today have used, the idea is always that the bank innovates on some kind of financial product, shares it with the customer. The central bank and the clearing houses enable the efficiency between the system, right? And then the second option is the big tech way, which is your Libras, your blockchains, and your cryptos around Visa and MasterCard. A lot of the countries, by the way, have built the entire drive for financial inclusion at the basis of these giants, and are sort of enabling or uh, helping these people actually get access to the masses. So, for example, Australia today has its own national payments network being powered by Visa, and therefore most of the transactions that happen are actually the data about those transactions and the cost of those transactions are feeding into the Visa bottom line across the board. Now, I would like to talk about a third way, that is the approach India has taken in the last 10 years, which is what we commonly call as the India Stack way. Now, the whole idea behind India Stack since inception has been to create a bottom layer that is a layer of API-fied journeys and enable this and basically provide this solution to a government entity, on top of which regulated players are able to sublet these solutions to unregulated fintechs that actually enable the end consumer to get access to various services. So, for example, in India Stack, if you look at, if I take an example of what India Stack is, you have Aadhaar authentication, you have eKYC, you have eSign, you have UPI, DigiLocker, Bharat Bill Pay, FASTag, and GSTN. The whole idea behind each of these solutions since inception was to provide a modular service to one government entity, enable the banking ecosystem or other regulated players to act like the fiduciaries that sublet this out to private players. And this middle layer is basically primarily to ensure compliance and security with the national laws. And then the fintechs who get access to these APIs are then able to combine them together and create a lot of innovation on top. So just for example, UPI, since the day it got launched, has seen massive adoption in the country and has increased the number of transactions that take place in the digital forum. It is in fact today doing around 2 billion transactions a month. And that has happened since in just four years since the launch of UPI. Similarly, Aadhaar, since the day we got Aadhaar, we have 1.2 billion Aadhaar IDs that have been issued. 33 billion Aadhaar-based authentications have taken place. Where do you use Aadhaar-based authentications? You use it to enable bank accounts. You use it to do your eKYCs. You use it to do your e-signs, signatures on legal documents, and all kinds of things. 7.5 billion eKYC transactions. 7.5 billion eKYC transactions in essence translates into the whole account opening process for about 647 million Aadhaar-enabled bank accounts that took place. And then other transactions were done for maybe access to fintech and investing platforms and all the other areas that you need KYC to happen. Now, another big advantage that Aadhaar gave since its launch has been direct benefit transfer of $32 billion to the customers or to the citizens around the country. So what basically Aadhaar has enabled is via this digital identity that each person in this country has. We now today in India have a way to digitally onboard a customer, to digitally be able to enable them to accept transactions, accept legal documents and contracts, and just uniquely identify the person, which is a very, very big problem for any government in the world today. Similarly, what UPI plus Aadhaar did since 2011 to 2018 was to increase the number of bank accounts in India by 4x around that. That's 347 new million bank accounts that got created. This typical journey of opening new bank accounts would have taken India around 50 years. And what's basically happened is, due to the power of such technologies that India Stack brought forth, we've been able to achieve this in a span of 7 years. All of this was done basically because of that. Sorry, one second. There's some question. Sorry. Yeah. So from the perspective of because of the Aadhaar and the UPI and the other layers of India Stack, the number of bank accounts in the country went up by 4x. Now, if we think about what all of this has impacted Rajni as a user, the journey of being able to digitally share all of her all of these steps, being able to follow these steps, requires various components, right? As a fintech, there's a need for a credit marketplace app or a loan marketplace. There's need to be able to share your data through digital rails, be able to see loan contracts, accept the best offer, which requires again being able to sign something digitally. Once you receive a loan, you need a transaction account or an app for that. When you're selling some good online, again, you need a payment app to enable the collections to happen. And finally, for loan repayment itself, you need to be able to repay back to the lender who gave you that loan in the first place. Now, because of the last 10 years, we now have solutions that are publicly available for any fintech startup to consume and successfully cater to Rajni. For example, you can do your Aadhaar eKYC when opening your bank account or your loan account. you can use the NBFC account aggregator, which is the latest innovation that's going to go live in the next 2 months, to be able to digitally share your data from your bank account to a lender or any other financial information user, for example, an investment platform or a wealth advisory platform, in a consented manner. Similarly, via the OKIN APIs that we are now building, the idea is that we will have a standard between the lenders of the world and lenders in India and any fintech marketplace, which will really reduce the cost of integration, which will simplify the whole process of being able to generate loan offers for a customer, and lead to lower costs, most importantly, lower costs. So, and once Rajni is now able to see multiple loan offers inside her application, she will be then able to choose the best offer, be able to e-sign it via Aadhaar or DigiLocker. The loan transfer will happen directly via UPI, and the collections process is going in the closed world, in the closed method that we saw back a couple of slides. What basically ends up happening is you have these walled gardens that get created, right? I mean, so for example, China itself, uh, we have Ant Financial Services there, which is one of the biggest lenders in that country, who is a subsidiary of Alibaba, who in essence controls a very, very major chunk of that market. However, because of the availability of these interoperable APIs at the bottommost layer, India does not have the fear of having regulatory, having capture by any one company, right? So you might have heard recently that WhatsApp got approved to launch on UPI. Even if WhatsApp, not even if, when WhatsApp manages to get 400 million customers into the UPI platform, it will still not be a WhatsApp only equation. You, as a startup entrepreneur, can always build an application that is interoperable with the WhatsApp APIs or the WhatsApp solution and accept payments. This allows innovation to happen at every step. Um, Unlike, for example, if we take the Paytm wallet or even the PhonePe wallet, if I were to open a startup today and want to use the Paytm payment QR codes to make the payment, I will have to either talk to Paytm, get approvals, um, or I'll have to just not do that. I will not get access without Paytm's explicit approval. However, because of the availability of India Stack, the interoperability has been guaranteed at the bottommost layer, and that enables us as a country to continuously have innovation and competition in areas that are monopolistic by nature. I mean, it's the nature of internet businesses to become a monopoly, right? However, how do you fight monopolies? You can fight them either via regulation and proactively stopping them, or you create decentralized API-fied bottommost layers, on top of which you just ensure that each party, even if they have 90% of the market, they're still interoperable with the remaining 10%, so that when somebody comes in and launches a new solution, they don't have to go through the process of basically getting the 100 customers on board, and having to fight the network effect uh, battle. So, so fundamentally, as he said, I mean, India Stack, basically the goal of this whole solution is to enable data sharing, is to enable consented payments, and to enable a fully end-to-end digital flow. What we've seen since launch of each of these components is that the fintech players have massively adopted each layer of the stack, used it to reduce their costs, and therefore be able to start serving customers such as Rajni in tier 2 and tier 3 cities as well. Um, I will just answer the question about the credit card piece. Now it's a tricky, it is a slightly tricky question. So I will choose the one which is closest to what we said. And I think the answer actually is what Ekansh mentioned. It is 1200 INRs. It is actually around 1500 to 1700 INR. That is the average cost of issuing a new credit card to a customer. And the reason for that is there is a 50 rupee credit card issuance fee, which is like the actual physical credit card. There is about 200 to 300 rupees that are taken by the person who goes and fills the form for you on a paper background. The process of doing a KYC itself, again, is a 200 rupee experience. And this is 200 basically not using India Stack or not using the uh, digital, fully digital rails out there. And then there are more costs, many more costs involved in terms of feeding the credit bureaus, in terms of enabling your fraud and registry checks out there. So yeah, I mean, I think Ekansh won that. Maybe.
Awesome. We'll get in touch with Ekansh. Thanks, Sudhanshu.
Okay. So finally, I mean, as I've spoken about all of these things are a work in progress. And basically, I'm here as part of iSpirit. iSpirit is a foundation that kind of does the think and do tank. The whole idea behind our entire approach has been to take a 30-year architect think to. So you have think tanks in universities who will do the research papers. Then you need a 10-year goal, which is basically about being able to create such public infrastructure. And then in the 5-year time space is where the private players actually create innovation, or actually are able to cater to the audience. Now all of our work is done by volunteers. So basically all of us come in, do a 2-year fellowship, and go through the volunteering process. I am happy to talk to anybody who's interested in knowing more about this, about what we've been doing at India Stack. And I'll be available on the Discord channel for any questions or comments. So yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sudhanshu, for those wonderful insights you shared about the fintech industry. Folks, Sudhanshu will be available with us for an AMA session over at our Discord later in the day. And Sudhanshu, if I can ask you for 3 key pieces of advice that you would like to give people who are specifically starting in fintech, right? I personally, I get this question a lot about like, hey, we want to break into fintech. What's the correct way for me to plan a career path, so to speak? Because most of the audience we have is college going folks, right? So what would you say to, let's say, yourself when you were barely into college a few years?
That's a very interesting question. So the thing about fintech is that unlike maybe some other industries, it's a very uh, institutionalized slash formalized sector. There are best practices for a lot of things available, and which have been evolved over years of iteration and dealing with money. Everybody deals with money, right? And everybody basically, since time immemorial, has been trying to figure out what is the right way to sort of enable the movement of money, either between savers and lenders, like borrowers and people who are saving money, or the person who wants to buy some goods and the merchant who's selling some goods. So in essence, fintech, my recommendation to anybody who wants to start out in this space is going to be to spend a year or two working in a fintech firm, working in a firm and trying to understand the nuances of, uh, you know, how do payments work, what is an issuer, what is an acquirer, how does lending work in essence. There are a lot of very good fintech startups right now in India. And I'll say that India is the hotbed of fintech innovation right now in all the sectors across the board. Maybe today we are not maybe, we are definitely at the cutting edge of what it means to basically take fintech to a billion users. And all the other countries, I have been personally part of various conversations with different countries who are now looking to adopt different parts of either UPI or Aadhaar or different areas of India Stack. And as we go forward, basically basically it's very important to have the knowledge before you start doing the innovation, or you start doing any kind of you start doing innovation, or you start doing a startup. So
Right. So
my first
understand all of the rules before starting to break them.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, my recommendation would be to pick up a fintech firm, go there, preferably go and work for any product fintech company that is out there in the market today, and then from that point of view, start looking at how to make changes happen. There are a lot of white spaces right now. So in terms of ideas, there's no dearth of ideas where you need startups and you need entrepreneurs to come in and make changes. However, for a college grad, the first step ought to be getting the know-hows of the industry.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Sudhanshu. And we'll meet you once again in the Discord AMA session later today. Folks, make sure you're registered on Discord. Make sure you join our servers. And let's have Sudhanshu OP in the chat once to show our respects. And also, as thanks for letting us know all of these insider information from the fintech industry. Thanks again, Sudhanshu, once again, and I'll meet you soon. Cheers.
Thank you.
What a ride it's been so far, folks. Thank you so much for tuning into the stream. We have two more we have three more, in fact, great speaker sessions lined up for you today. And our next speaker is Nitish Yadav, who's a product designer at Hackout, another one of our Hackout insiders. He's specializes in type design, and he works at the convergence of digital products as well as typography. Most of his time today is occupied by researching on future interfaces for AR and VR based projects. So, Nitish, can you hear me? Are you here? Can we see you? There we go. Nitish Yadav is here. Let us know if you can see him. If you can hear. Yeah, your internet seems to be a bit patchy today, but we can see you, so that's cool. Try speaking something.
Oh, wait, I'll just try to switch to another. Wait, I'll switch to another connection. Yeah.
Sure.
Is it working fine right now? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Nitish. Thanks for coming along. Awesome.
Cool.
Great. So Nitish, before we get started, why don't you just tell us like a one-liner of what you're going to be showing us today?
So basically, I will be introducing people with the new challenges that are coming with these new like mediums like AR and VR. So in this case, I think this would be slightly heavily relied on VR versus AR, though AR has been my area of research. But I think as an introduction, starting with VR would be a good option. So I think in the chat, if you can, if the guys who are on who are watching the video, can you guys tell me like at what stage are you in learning all this tech? Are you like very beginner? Then I'll like craft the talk, or I'll just start from the very basics. Or if you know quite a bit about it, then I'll slightly maybe I'll dig in deeper into the topics. So just let us know.
Folks, you heard it here. Let's have how experienced you are with all of the the technologies of the future AR and VR. What does your skill set include? Let Nitish know the topics that you are already familiar with. Let Nitish also know the topics that you want to learn about for the very first time, potentially. Let's have it in the chat, folks. Vinamra says noob. Well, that is a very succinct way of answering our questions, and we have a lot of beginners and newbies, which includes me, by the way. Like I have next to zero experience designing or building for all of these fronts. Vishud says I'm pretty familiar with some Echo AR tech.
Okay, cool.
Awesome. So I guess that gives us context to take this forward. Nitish, let's have it, man. It's all yours.
Cool. Share my screen. So yeah, can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can. Awesome.
Cool, perfect. I think I've just because, okay, cool. I have one intermediate person, Vikram. Cool. So I'll just address that thing as well. Yeah, let's start the presentation. So basically, yeah, as Siddharth has introduced me, like I work as a product designer at Hackout. So apart from that, like that's my full-time job. And then beyond that, like I've been researching on like various challenges in augmented reality. And so basically augmented reality has been the main area of research. But again, like I've been solving problems for virtual reality as well. So in terms of like basically experience in terms of reading, in terms of like typography. Those were the challenges. But and now that like after like in like 1.5 years ago, so I closed on like the first phase of my research, and then now I am working more towards like typography is pretty much sorted, and now I'm working on like basically the guidelines for like these interfaces which are there in AI. So I think that sums up what I have been doing apart from my full-time job. So starting from one of the basic thing, I think I start with, so even for all my talks, I start with basically differentiating between these two mediums. So because there has been a lot of lingo floating around. So even when I like mentor people, students who are doing research, so in that case also like people are doing research, so they get quite confused about like several terminologies which are going on. So in this case, I would say like basically if you're focusing on anything, then you should focus on like if you're starting out or if you are starting out in terms of learning. So the best entry point for you is to go and see the research by Paul Milgram. So he was a person who kind of who had this basically a continuum weight which was between reality and virtuality. So that differentiated it quite well. And then beyond that, like if you see so there's a real environment on the left, and then there is virtual environment on the right. So these are the two extremes when we talk about augmented reality and virtual reality. So in this case, like augmented reality, slightly what it does is it overlays the information over the real world. And then in virtual reality, what happens is everything is synthetic. Everything has been designed. Everything is virtual. So that's the differentiation. And then in that case, like if you do basic kind of interaction, then people tend to call it mixed reality. But again, you have to basically stick to these three concepts. Don't like some people will like again introduce with you introduce you with like terminology like spatial computing, extended reality, and all those kind of things. So don't go there. Like basically stick to this, and then your life would be sorted. Because like in 2-3 years, all these things would like basically the differentiation which people give at this point of time will be redundant, and then the terms which will be left at the end would be augmented reality and virtual reality. And then again, one thing I would want to clear out that mixed reality has been something which has become a marketing term from Microsoft side. And then there is another term, spatial computing, which is marketing term from Magic Leap side. So these are the terms. So you have to understand like what is toothpaste versus what is Colgate. Okay, so this is the basic differentiation. So now moving forward, like I'll dig in deeper between virtual reality and augmented reality and what changes in these two. So in virtual reality, I had already mentioned that everything is computer generated. And then like if we talk in terms of design, so if everything is computer generated, then as a designer, as an experienced designer who is designing like maybe an app or a basic game or an experience in that like virtual reality headset, then what happens is you tend to have control over like most of the factors. The only thing which you can't control is the behavior of people or the interaction that people are going to do. So in that case, that is the only thing that you can't control. But as we move to augmented reality, what happens is basically you have the real environment, and then real environment means that okay, your real environment in which you are wearing the headset would be totally different versus what your user is going to be using it. So in that case, like just imagine like I'm wearing these glasses, and then right now I'm sitting in my room, and then like my background. So the background I see. So if I'm reading an article, so in that case, what happens is the background can be like totally plain, or it can be like all the frames or the paintings or whatever artwork is there on my wall. Versus if I move out, then it would be like people walking around. It would be like basically all the like noise which comes in with people, light, and then all the things that you can't control. So those things are beyond your control. So as a designer, you have a limited control over whatever you are designing. And in case of augmented reality, so in that case, what happens is that's why like one of the reasons my research has been more inclined towards AR, because the amount of challenges which are there are higher. So solving for those is much more like kind of fruitful for me as like in case of coming up with new things and then solving for challenges. Versus virtual reality. Virtual reality is almost like I can slightly compare it with one thing, like slapping your screens right in front of your eyes. So that's the kind of differentiation. And then another one myth breaking that I want to do is basically, so this is my personal opinion that has been there, and then this will again become quite normal. Though on the right, you see mobile AR versus like headset based AR. So whatever I work on is mostly headset based AR. So in that case, what happens, why I don't consider like mobile AR to be really true AR, because in that case, like the challenges are quite like we have already solved for like screen based challenges. We already use, like, even if I'm using like my Headout app on like one of the mobile handset. So in that case, like I already know the principles which goes into it, and then basically just like in that case, I switch on my camera and then I can place markers over that. So in that case, like basically small amount of changes which happen. But again, if you are really like keen on knowing more about like AR or क्या बोलते हैं, VR, then it's much more beneficial for you to stick to headsets, because that's the area which would be like quite beneficial for you in coming time, because the demand for designers, the demand for engineers is rising basically, like day by day, as the new like headsets are getting mass like consumed now. Like Oculus 2 has been released, and then the adoption rate has been high, and then slowly the AR headsets are also like getting better and better. So once the mass consumer product is released, so basically the prices goes down, then again like more and more people would be owning those headsets. So I think in that case, I think if you're getting into this, then I would like totally recommend getting into headset based AR. And then when I talk about headset, then this is the differentiation between like AR headsets are of two types. So basically, one is optical see-through. Basically, when I talk about optics, that means these glasses, basically lenses. So in this case, this is there. And then in video see-through, what happens is basically you have so there is a camera attached to your headset which captures the feed, and then it kind of processes the feed and then shows. So on the screen, it shows you the whole video feed on your screen, and then adds like basically text or whatever kind of like interface that you have designed over that video feed. So in this case, it's almost like if you're watching any news channel, then you see like certain kind of, so on over the video, then you see maybe a logo or something like that. That kind of processing happens in terms of like your video see-through devices. And then if I have to give you an example, so I'll show you the devices, how they might look or they look. So on the right, you can see a Wazoo headset, which is like industry, I think one of the most like the resolution wise, one of the most advanced headset. So it provides two ways to interact. So one is like basically virtual reality. In that case, like the whole screen is blanked out, so you are totally in a secluded space, which is like totally virtual. And then if it can be turned into a optical, basically video see-through device, once these cameras, which are like there in the front, are activated. So in that case, these cameras will take the feed from right in front of me, and then it will show whatever information has to be shown to you, and it will overlay over the video feed. Versus what happens in optical see-through is just like similar to these glasses, or like maybe HoloLens or these. So basically, we are talking about lenses. So in that case, like you see the world right how it is, how really it is. And then basically what happens is through like LCOS displays or different kind of display techniques, what happens is the text is displayed on the lenses itself. So in that case, like you see the real world, and then basically your virtual information, which is there, is displayed on the basic screen, which is right in front of you. So this is the basic differentiation, and I think it's quite important for you to know this. And then I think we can move on to the main challenges. So not even challenges, but what is new in VR world that changes like how we design for these mediums as compared to like designing for screens. So first thing which comes into play is your degrees of freedom. So earlier, what happens is if you're wearing a headset, then there are two kind of degrees of freedom which are allowed. So first is 3 degrees of freedom. In that case, what you can do is first is you can like move your head up and down. Second is you can move your head towards left or right. So that's the second degree. And the third degree is you can tilt your head. So the example for these headsets would be like your Google Cardboard, or like Oculus, basically Gear VR, if Samsung Gear VR, if you remember that old headset. So those were the basic things. In this case, I think if you might, some people might have seen the apps like roller coaster rides or something like that. In that case, like this is a very primitive stage of like VR headset. but again, like these have been like totally, these are fading away. So now the headsets which are quite popular are 6 degrees of freedom. In this case, what happens is like along with your head movements, what you can do is you can move forward, you can move side, you can move up and down. So that whole tracking is already there in like in the headset. Like if I am talking about Oculus Quest, and then or any other VR headset. So this all these headsets which are coming in now, which are quite popular, are have 6 degrees of freedom. So in this case, like once you get into degrees of freedom, then your interaction type changes. So I'll just basically give you an example. So in case of like basically 3 degrees of freedom, if you wanted to do like choose something, or if you wanted to, you were limited in terms of like you can't move around. So in that case, like if you move around, then the whole experience, those kind of experience were not like catering to basically these kind of needs. So if these were static, you just sit in a sofa, you sit or you stand in the middle of the room, and then you experience this. In 6 degrees of freedom, it allows you. So if I think I can give you one like major example. If somebody, if you guys can search for Beat Saber. Beat Saber is quite a popular game, and then I think in that case, like you can move down, you can strafe, and then you can do all kind of things, and then that that gives you much more immersiveness. So in 3 degrees of freedom is just like again like slightly step above a screen experience, but 6 degrees of freedom is the thing in terms of immersive experiences. Further, like now another thing which why if you're designing for like AR or VR, then and then especially headsets. So in that case, you have to follow certain guidelines, which I'm sharing with you, that you have to keep in mind the amount. So basically, here if you see the amount of head movement you can do in terms of degrees of up and down can be like from 20 degrees to 10 degrees. What this means is whatever interfaces that you are going to design have to be confined, have to be placed right in front of the user at a specific kind of limit, so that it's so that so and these experiences are the closer ones. If you are talking about virtual signages or like on the road or something like that, the guidelines are totally different. This what I'm telling you is for near eye experiences. So in this case, like if you're like opening a website on your AR headset or VR headset, then where it should be. So in this case, like this is a comfortable region, and then the maximum you can go up to like 60, which is to be honest, like going beyond 20 range is something like which is not recommended. So and then because that falls under curiosity zone. So if you're giving an experience, so like one or two kind of like basic movements you can allow there, where if somebody, so maybe you the person is sitting in a cockpit, and then in that case, like he has to switch on something or off something. In that case, and that switch has to be one switch. So if you put 10 switches there which are part of the main experience, then that's not the right way to do it, because in that case, like user will have fatigue within like few minutes of using your like playing your game or like whatever experience you have designed. So this is the thing which you have to keep in mind. Second is your placement in terms of like in like direction, which is the horizontal plane. So in that case, like best would be like going up to like 30 degrees, so which is a comfortable region. And then the moment you do this, and then in that case what happens is the moment you start so basically again the same principle applies. So if you have to do like some interactions are required, so those can go up to like 55 degrees, and then most of your like time that the user has to spend within like your 30 degrees. And then like maybe one again the same kind of example, that one interaction where maybe your power button that you don't want to show in front of the user, you want to slightly hide it, then you can place it on the side. But that interaction has to be a limited interaction. That it should not happen at regular intervals, because again like fatigue will come into play. And then in this case, I think one of the best thing is even what you can just try doing is try moving your head for a good amount of time, and then you'll realize like what is a comfortable range. And then these are the principles of which were created based on like heavy testing, and then that's why like these guidelines are coming into play. And then again, like side to side movement, you can allow it to 15 degrees max. So in this case, okay, this, and then just imagine if you're doing this, and then and then it is a fake wind movement. So maybe you are flying a plane, and then in that case, like if this kind of thing happens where you have to control your whole plane or the plane you're flying or the experience you're doing, in that case, like just by your head. So within 2 minutes your user will leave your application, because this much is fine, like I can do this much and then it's fine. And then the moment I had to do this and then like user gets hurt, then again it's not recommended. And then that's like basically that's a clear no-no for you in terms of experience, in terms of head movement. And then again, there are viewing zones, as I'd already discussed. So there's a top view, and then again, in terms of placement, I'll show you like where. So basically, that has been divided into 3 regions. So first is your foreground. Foreground is like limited for like basic notifications. So in this case, just imagine like your basic notifications are there. So maybe your timings are there right close to your eye, and then basically notification icon can be. So in that case, I think I would say like your status bar of your mobile can come into the foreground area, the interactions which are there. And then the mid-ground holds all the things. So basically, all the interactions that you're going to do on your like laptop screen. Once we move to spatial computing, then all those things will happen basically in the mid-ground region. So in that case, like, and then one of the recommended thing is like it's up to 15 meters, but it's recommended to place that kind of object, those kind of virtual objects within like 2 meters reach. So I'll show you that. So this is these are the guide. This one is from the guideline from HoloLens. So in that case, what happens is so they quite recommend like to leave 1 point, and then this all the area which I'm telling you is in virtual like virtual aspect. So whenever you are designing, so the app you use for designing these experiences is going to be Unity. So in this case, like in Unity, so where your basically camera placement is going to be there. After that, you leave 1.25 meters, and then after that, you start placing all the elements which are part of your experience. So be it your website window, be it your like maybe you're designing something, maybe a movie watching experience or something like that. Even though the user can walk close to it, but again, that's the optimum range that you have to provide. Like it's at least like 2 meters away from the user, and then 2 to 5 meters. And then this is something where the main interaction happens. Beyond that, it becomes the environment region. So in that case, like just imagine you are sitting in a virtual environment where your like the screen, your virtual screen, which is there, so or your virtual computer is there in within the range of like 2 to 5 meters, and then beyond that, it's all your background. So maybe you are in an environment which is replicating your like your study room or something like that, or maybe you're sitting in on a cliff or something like that. In that case, so that goes beyond 5 meters. All the elements of that. Further, the another aspect, which is the tangible aspect, is your like placement of your controller. So in that case, like all your glasses, so what they do is they tend to have IR sensors right at the top and then at the bottom. So they have a particular range. So in that case, like you have to design your experience such that your controllers are always in view. And then again, this is quite a problem in terms of like fatigue, because if and then this way, like in experiences where you have to keep in mind, like if it is an experience which is controller heavy, that you have to use the controller all the time, then you have to decide like in which reason you have to keep it, and then what kind of is it like in the range. And then in that case, like if your controller is coming here, and then basically your screen, whatever your virtual screen is, then you have to like adjust the placement of that according to like basically if you're using the controller or virtual keyboard. So at the end, I'll show you what are the different like input techniques, but I think I'll leave it there. So this, like if you see the first image, in that case, like this used to be the earlier norm. But and the best thing used to be like, okay, when you were deciding your computable height or something like that, then you used to go with like, okay, the arm's length, where the arm rests. So in that case, you have to keep this in mind, like where your controller is going to go, and then what kind of input technique you're going to use based on your experience. Further, in this case, like in the whole concept of like designing for AR VR, one thing you have to do is you have to make it feel real, because and then till the time you make it feel real is just the engagement increases like as okay, if I touch an object, like if I feel some kind of sensation or something like that, in that case I tend to get immersed more versus like, okay, there is a object, there is a virtual object in front of me, and then I can just move my hand through it. So that doesn't feel like much more basically if I there is no interaction. So in this case, like the real interaction would be, just imagine like there is a floating virtual phone in front of me. So in that case, what happens is if I keep my hand there, so this should have like collision like sequence to it, where the moment it detects that the hand is touching it, it should either fall, it should either move, or something like interaction. Now I'll tell you how we can. So in that case, like the phone is falling down or some like phone moves. So basically, this is there, and then I first cue for a.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. I think we lost Nitish there.
Yeah, bro.
Yo, Nitish, you live.
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry, it's BSNL.
Well, that explains a lot. All right, go for it, Nitish.
Basically PSV, in that case, like PlayStation haptic feedback, which we get on the controllers. The moment we hit our cars, on the side, then what happens is you feel the movement that something has happened. So in that case, haptic feedback is like a major thing. Second thing which comes into play is you can use sounds as a cue as well, where like okay, the sounds play once you hit something or something like that. In that case, user gets to know that something is happening. I'm touching something, so user is getting a feedback. So that feedback is quite important in the whole experience to make it feel much more immersive. So moving further, I'll go to occlusion. So occlusion is more towards talking about AR. So in this case, what happens is if you see the image on the left. So what happens is if there is a virtual object and then somebody is walking past that. So in that case, like if you see that whole thing, like your leg passing through that, like maybe in this case Pikachu. In that case, what happens is you tend to feel okay, this is not real because your brain can make out that differentiation. And then versus if you see like okay the part which is there. So if a person is walking in front of that and then maybe Pikachu was moving behind that, and then that whole occlusion happens, that it gets the part behind the leg gets hidden. In that case, it gives much more cue for your brain to like see, and it makes it much more real. So occlusion is something which is very important in case of AR. And then in this case, I think if you're talking about other experiences as well, just imagine like there is something hiding behind your sofa. If you can see that object like floating in the air or something like that, then you clearly feel that this is not this is something which is not that real. So to get that immersiveness, to get that reality factor into it, occlusion is quite important in AR. Further, I'll move. So, as I already mentioned, that I would be like mentioning more towards VR in terms of like basic guidelines, because these are slightly the frozen ones, versus AR because everything is in there are no like agreed guidelines, but there are slightly best practices. And in this case, in VR as well, as this is a new space, there are some best practices which has been agreed by a good amount of like researchers and people. So I would share with you those, versus like I won't share anything which is still in like the research phase. So in this case, the first thing which comes into play is getting used to the virtual environment for your user. So now if you're designing an experience, so what you do is if you are introducing somebody to a totally new environment, which is like okay, the person is maybe right now he's sitting in a room, but now you are like maybe just transporting that person to a whole new area, maybe right in front of cabin in a mountain or something like that. In that case, the changes, the introduction to the new scenery or the new environment has to be gradual, so that the person gradually sees the whole thing. So and then he kind of, so in that case like one, if I say gradual, in that case, like just imagine you have loaded this this environment which is there in the image, and then you let the user understand this environment, like slightly seep in the environment, and then start showing him like basic notifications about what to do, and then like what not to do. And then if you want to ask question, like, okay, you have to move in, you have to show them instructions. So in that case, like maybe give them few seconds of like rest, so that your environment has loaded. Let them like see the surroundings, and then basically that. And then show maybe the first thing if you want to do is you want to ask question about like, okay, you want to get into the room, or like this is the like introduction of what it is, and then these are the actions you can do. In that case, like slowly gradually moving to those actions are something which are quite recommended, so that the person doesn't get that shock factor of like, okay, suddenly I was transported into a totally new area, and then like I'm processing that information, and then again you bombard my brain with another like a notification that you have to do this. And so that has to be avoided. And then in this case, another thing which is quite important is you have to avoid unnecessary scene changes. So in that case, what that means is right now like basically the experience was I was sitting inside this cabin, and then like I push a button, and then suddenly I'm transported to another room. So that kind of thing should not happen in a very so in that case, like maybe experience if you're designing. So if maybe I was and so if I'm talking with a virtual experience, maybe you were sitting in the living room and then watching your virtual TV, and then now you want to go to your study room or something like that. And then in that case, like if you want to move to the study room, then maybe introduce certain kind of like changes where it's almost like you gradually move him to that room. So basically providing them with cues, okay, walk to that room, walk in that case, like it's not like real walking, but virtually you have to walk to that room, so that like there is a gradual change in the room versus like totally teleporting that person to that other room. So in that case, what at the click of a button. So that is not recommended. And then like again, rapid changes of scenes are also not not recommended, because in this case we as humans are not like quite used to these changes. So in that case, rapid changes of scene, what it means is one this moment you are in first room, and then the second moment you are just like in a quick like in a quick second, then you are moving to another room. In that case, what your brain is not processing it, or if you're using some kind of like speed movement between the room, in that case, like again, your body is not moving, and then like visually you are like moving fast. So in that case, like again, some people feel nausea and all those kind of problems, and those problems comes in with these kind of like rapid changes. So you have to factor in those kind of like movements between different aspects. So next is providing your user with breaks. So in this case, like maybe if you're playing somewhat like Street Fighter in virtual reality, so maybe you are playing an episode of Black Mirror, the striking vipers. So in this case, like basically, just imagine you are playing a game, and then you're wearing a VR headset, and then suddenly maybe a bell rings or something like that happen, or maybe certain kind of situation like arises, which is a important situation where you allow the user to pause these experiences. So where interruption, so you have to factor in that interruption can be there. So if you don't allow these people to like pause that game, or like pause that experience, then in that case what happens is it like basically ruins the whole thing. So in that case, next time, so basically if I take an example, like second thing would be like intense experiences like Beat Saber, which is quite, people use it for exercising. And then there are other like apps which are coming in which are much more focused towards like basically exercising. In that case, what happens is if you don't allow people to like, maybe somebody has stretched his arm or his or her leg. So in that case, you allow these people to kind of just pause that in between, take rest, and then continue from that. So in that case, it's almost like basically the gaming principle comes into play. If you don't allow them, they'll lose their progress. Then again, the person won't be like playing your game the next time, because again, in that case, the whole, maybe just imagine the person was about to create a high score, and then he loses at that point of time. Like somebody came in on the door, and in the building, he has to open the door or something like that, or maybe he's making tea or something like that. Emergency is coming. So in that case, you have to factor in user breaks as well. Another thing is like I think I covered this slightly earlier as well, which is like focusing on discomfort. So acceleration is something which becomes quite a huge problem. So in all your 3 degrees of freedom, the Google Cardboard or Samsung Gear VR, people the most popular thing was the roller coaster. In that case, like people used to feel a lot more nausea as compared to other glasses because those are very primitive headsets. Those didn't have any compensation for these kind of aspects. So in this case, like if you're doing acceleration, then you have to keep in mind the what is the optimum range. You have to keep in you have to learn about those, and then you have to stay in optimum range. And then in this case, one of the things which has to be avoided, and then if you're talking about like again in this case I will give you extreme examples which are coming from games, because in that case like games tends to like go towards the extremes in terms of like making people do things. So in this case, if like if you are gamers out there, you know the best thing in while running in a game is that especially in FPS game as first person shooter game, is that you can strafe, you can just run and then you can slide and then you can move to another place. So if that kind of experience or if that kind of similar action happens in a VR headset, then your brain is not optimized to see or balance that kind of movement. So in that case, what happens is in a virtual world your head movement would be this. In a real world your head would be straight in front of you. So in that case your brain gets confused, and then there is one thing which happens is again the when brain gets misaligned with whatever the eyes are seeing versus whatever the body movement is there, then again you'll again end up having nausea, or some people tend to have vomiting problems as well. So this is something which you have to avoid for you know so in VR at this point of time, since people are slowly getting used to it, then like keeping in mind the discomfort is your it should be your first priority. And then again, another factor which is quite common these days is avoiding collisions. So in that case, like if in this case, this person hit basically this footage, and then where this woman hits the guy sitting there with the controller. So in this case, you have to like as a experienced designer, what you have to do is you have to keep in mind that you give the user the cues in terms of the safe area first. So in this happens in Oculus Quest. What happens is it allows you to mark the safe area where you are. But in that case, what happens is you have to calculate the safe area. Plus, what you have to calculate, one more thing is that you're basically, if you're standing somewhere and then your safe area is somewhat like that. So in that case, what a safe area is of two types. So in that case, one is your leg movement. So basically, just imagine like there is a 1 meter by 1 meter square area which is there for you to move around. So in that case, what happens is the safe area should be like 1 meter area box plus your arm's length. So in that case, otherwise, what happens is your like basically your system won't recognize, even though you are at the edge of like 1 meter. But what happens is so you like decided you have marked the area which was supposed to be 1 meter, and then there was a wall at like beyond 1 meter, so at 1 meter. So what happens in that case is if the system has allowed you to move for 1 meter. So in that case, if you'll walk towards that wall, and then the moment you do certain action, so you are at the wall, if wall was at 1 meter, and then your hand goes up to like maybe 0.5 meter or something like that, in that case you are hitting the wall, so you're hurting yourself. So these are the things that you have to keep in mind, you have to design for, that you have to give like basically this tolerance while calculating. So these have to be designed, you have to keep in mind while designing your app or while designing your experience. So safety markers are there, but you have to optimize those for like all these aspects where hand movements have to be taken into consideration. And then again, like if best thing would be like limiting the movement. So in that case, what happens is you just allow the user to just sit or just stand at a single place, and then if he or she has to move to like different section, if she's walking in a forest, then you can use the controllers to move around that area. So that is another good way. Like if so, in this case, you can allow the user to have two kind of options. If he or she has space to move around, so in that case, basically he or she can just allow for the movement. So basically 6 degrees of freedom. And then in the cases where the area is small, then in that case you can like introduce the methods like teleportation. In that case, what happens is basically you point your controller towards a certain point, and then you just hit the button, and then you just teleport, or you just jump to that location. And then again, even so, these the things we were discussing earlier, so most of them were physical in nature. Now we are talking about the psychological aspects, like what is the psychological discomfort that can happen in this case. So if you're just imagine your user is on a roller coaster, or he's standing right at the edge of the cliff, then it makes psychologically, what it does is it kind of creates this basically fear in people's mind. So you have to keep in mind that your experiences are designed such that the user doesn't get like, okay, if it is something like maybe roller coaster ride or something like that, in that case height is something which is quite a given that you have to do that. But in that case also you have to keep in mind certain factors that we have discussed earlier. But in case that you want to design app which is like a virtual study room or a virtual workstation or something like that, and then you are showing it like you have made it at the edge of the cliff, then that's not the recommended thing, because a good amount of people will get scared, and then they won't be able to use that basically what experience you have designed. Second is virtual sharp objects too. So even you psychologically, your brain recognizes shapes, and then again in that case, sharp objects in virtual world also give a certain kind of fear to people. Like, okay, maybe just imagine like there are nails in wherever you're walking. So there are nails in the area. So those also have certain kind of basically fear in people's mind that like, okay, if I walk in that area, so then again they'll fear for it. And then they maybe, if that is the area that people have to walk for, if in the experience you are designing that to be something like, okay, that I don't want people to go towards that path, then having nails does the purpose that, okay, they are getting scared, they won't use the area. But if you have only one path that the user has to walk through in the virtual environment, and then you have spread sharp objects in that area, then that's not a recommended thing to do in that case. Plus, like another thing which comes into play is last spaces. Again, a lot of people get like this feel that they get quite confused when they are allowed to just like stay in a very last space. And then with last space, I'm not talking about large rooms or something like that. I'm talking about galaxy space. So in that case, like certain people, so in that case, like just imagine an experience where a person is floating in the galaxy. So some people might be like used to it, a lot. So in these kind of experiences, you have to put in disclaimers that this is the last phase. Like if you're not comfortable with this, please don't use it. So again, in this like whole new space, there are a lot of disclaimers that have to go with the experience that you design, and then you have to stay in the boundaries. And then we were talking about the large space, and then now we are coming to small space. So keeping your users in a small confined space for longer duration of time also has psychological effects. So maybe you are just like keeping your user inside an elevator for a long duration of time. So in that case, again, that has consequences over like their experience in the app. So that has to be also kept in mind. That okay, the durations have to be balanced such that that whole kind of claustrophobia doesn't come into play while like experiencing your app or your like basically whatever experience you have designed. And another thing which is like quite like this is a preferential thing, though it's not like if it is allowed for if your game requires it, if your application requires it, then you can do certain kind of things. And then what user agency means is, so I'll explain this with an example. So just imagine that there's a broken piece of like painting in your room, or there is a broken glass, or maybe a tilted painting. So certain people get like fidgety about all those kind of things. So again, these are also like so just imagine you are designing an application which is for maybe like old age people or people suffering from different kind of basically medical usage in that case. So in that case, you have to design for like the cases that things are perfect, things are not like that people get confused with or like have any alignment issues. So maybe your painting is slightly like misaligned, and your 2 3 paintings are misaligned which are there in your virtual environment. In that case, what happens is then the person who's already suffering from like maybe PTSD or something like that, then they tend to kind of focus on all those aspects, and then they'll have problem in a case of like these kind of experiences. So next, I'm moving to scale. So scale is quite important. So basically, just imagine you are showing an experience where it's almost like you as a user. So basically, the experience you have designed your user to be very small in terms of the space which is there. So maybe you're showing a dinosaur in front of the in front of the user or the person who's using that experience. So in that case, what happens is that fear comes into play. So the moment that the dinosaur walks towards you, then the user will tend to get fearful of it, and then it might break the experience. If that is part of the experience, then it's good. But again, if it is not part of your experience, if it is not something which is very essential for it, then the scale has to be like 1:1 scale, so that there is no misalignment between your visuals versus whatever is there in terms of your the personal experience or your personal space. And then, as I'd mentioned, that I would be like slowly taking you through the input methods. So if you're talking about input methods right now, we have multiple input methods available for us in terms of like AR and VR. So first is like basically virtual keyboards, which are controller based. So you use your controller and then you just type it using that. So that is one. Second is your hand tracking. Basically, the headsets can like track your hands, so you can type on the virtual keyboard, like which is like it doesn't exist, but in thin air it's there. You can just type using that. And then this second example is from the keyboard, which is there on HoloLens. And then third is your voice input. So this right here, a lot of these browsers now allow you to do voice input. So basically, this visual is from Reality browser, Mozilla Reality browser, which is again like one of the best browsers if you want to browse information in any of your VR headset. Further, there are new variables coming in, but I have tried to do these, and then there is no kind of like very effective variable available at the moment. So this might get better in future, but again, not a recommended input method at this stage of time. Third one is again your eye tracking. Eye tracking is basically tracks your iris and then your basically your eye movement. So in that case, like you can just gaze detection happens. So in that case, like if I just want to select a button, in that case, what happens is I can just look at that button, and then the marker will move right with my gauge, and then I can just stay there for a second. It will just like click that button. So that's one method. And then there is so I think if you would have used headsets like cardboard, Google Cardboard, or like maybe Samsung Gear VR, in that case it used to have this gauge thing where there was a reticule where there is a small pointer in the middle of the screen. So if you want to click on a button, then what you used to do was wherever the button is there in front of you, you just move that small like dot right to that button, and then you stare at that for a few seconds, and then the whole like the loader loads, and then once it completes its revolution, that things get selected. So I think that this is like another becoming this is I think getting fading away, because three of like headsets are going totally away. So this was another method. And then I think I won't go to the advanced like methods, which are like maybe brain interface methods, which are already there in terms of like people are using them. So there are few devices available, but again, those are not quite popular at this point of time. So I think most probably I'd give you a basic intro of what is there in terms of AR and VR. So if you have any further questions, you can just let me know, and then we can just like I can take up questions. Thanks, folks.
Yo, thank you so much, Nitish. Thank you so much for that lovely intro to AR and VR. Some of your slides were very, very thought provoking. I especially like the one where you informed us about the mental burdens that we can sort of introduce on users if we are not careful, right? Something else that I was thinking of while your session was going on is the way we handle epilepsy warnings and other similar uh, uh, warnings in the design that we do today. I wonder how feasible it would be, or how necessary and urgent it would be to carry all of those, to make these mediums of the future more accessible and more inclusive, and not to punish the users in a way where they wouldn't be wanting to. But I guess that's a whole another discussion. I'm sure you have a lot to say there too.
So in this
Before
case,
we
I think
move
I'll
on,
just clearly say one thing. So in case of even if you are unsure of even a single thing in your VR experience, then it's the best practice that you put a disclaimer for it, because right now nobody knows what is there in VR. And then the moment brain gets, because it's also like you're keeping yourself safe, you're keeping your company safe, because the moment this is like uncharted ground, and somebody can sue you for any small mistake which is there, because there are no rules for that.
yeah, that's true. That's true. Before we move ahead, though, I'm told you had a question for our audience members, and if they get the correct answer within a few minutes of you asking, they're also going to win some cool goodies. So why don't you go ahead and ask the question to the chat?
Cool. So I think I'll ask it here only. So
Yeah.
basically, my question was, who knows the person who has been created as the creator of first AR headset, and then what was that headset called? So basically, two-part question.
Awesome, folks. You know the question. Let's have the answers. Who created the first AR headset, and what was that headset called? The first person to get the correct answer wins, and we'll have some merch sent over your way. Mm, Ivan Sutherland is one of the suggested answers.
That's the right answer. You
Yes.
have to tell the name of the headset.
Name the headset winner.
I think I would recommend everyone to just go through the story of the name of the headset as well. It's quite a fun story.
I can sense Vinamra furiously Googling.
Close Venom. Yep,
And we have
that's it.
the correct answer. We have the correct answer. Vinamra has delivered again. Um, it's a close one though. Even Manasvi uh, got the answer within the same ballpark. Nitish, you're the quiz master for this one. You have
So
to.
I think in that case, like the answer was supposed to be like go. It's a two-part question. So the one I think Venom answered both of them.
Yeah, that's true. All right, Vinamra, congratulations. You have won Nitish's quiz. We'll get in touch soon. And thank you so much, Nitish, for this lovely introduction to VR. And we'll catch up soon on the Discord AMA session that will happen later today at 2 p.m. onwards. So make sure
Cool.
you're part of our Discord. And thank you so much, Nitish, once again. Can we have Nitish OP in the chat, please?
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
man.
See you, bro. I love Nitish's work because he uses technology from 10 years ago, which is his BSNL connection, to design technology of 10 years later, which is AR and VR. But don't quote me on that 10 years figure. However, swiftly moving on to our next speaker, we have Ayush Rai. Ayush, if you can hear me, say hi and turn on your video so we can see you. Ayush, if you can hear us, do let us know. So,
Hello.
hey,
Hey, Siddharth.
hey, yes, you're
Can you
here.
hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, awesome. And I think you will need to allow me to start my video.
Mm, I believe so. Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. You're
So,
here. You're here. Hello, Ayush. Hello. Welcome
hey,
to.
Siddharth. Yeah.
Folks, for those of you who don't know, Ayush is the founder and CEO of Inito. It's India's first YC-backed medtech startup, And Ayush is very kindly going to run us through some of the difficulties that we can run into on building a hardware-based tech startup in India. Um, Inito recently became the first home medical device from India to clear the US FDA regulations. And uh, uh, I should also mention that Ayush has been featured in Forbes 30 under 30 for Asia list. So Ayush, thank you so much for joining in. Let's hear it, man. The stage is all yours.
Cool. So I will also share my screen. Yeah. Okay. So when I was in college, I always wondered why don't we have any hardware companies from India, right? Uh, and uh, and I always kept asking this question that we are a country of a billion people. We build good software. We have been selling for the world. Why don't we have them? And that question always intrigued me. And I think in the journey of past couple of years, I have sort of realized what does it take to build a hardware startup. And I would like to ask everyone, how many companies do you know who builds cutting edge hardware in India? Maybe anybody in the audience wants to take it up? Okay, so the real answer is no one, right? And So we have all the Indian hardware companies that call them multinational, but they still make like fans and coolers and stuff like that and ACs, but nobody really makes cutting edge hardware, right? We all use phones, and now we increasingly hear that Apple is starting to manufacture in India, etc. But what they're really doing is putting stuff together at the final stage. Nobody builds cutting edge hardware in India, right? Uh, so uh, so when I thought of giving a talk about hardware, one of the questions was why actually talk about hardware? Because it's a hackathon and it's supposed to be software. It's supposed to be building something cool in 2 days, in 2 nights, right? Why are we even talking about hardware, right? So I think let's just rewind back a little bit and understand what.
Ayush, sorry to interrupt. We get word from the audience that there's some air and noise disturbance on your end. Is it your mic? Do you have like a
Just one
pop
second.
filter?
Just 1 second.
Sure.
Is it okay now?
Yeah. It's a lot
Okay.
better. Awesome. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah. So I think the question is why even talk about hardware in a hackathon? We're supposed to build stuff in 2 days, right? In a hackathon. So let's rewind a little bit and figure out what hardware used to be. So hardware traditionally was basically a piece of hardware, a physical thing that did a function. You sold it one time, and after you sold it, you could never upgrade it, never did anything about it. Like this bottle. Once I bought this bottle, it is my bottle, right? Most of the stuff was made in China and sold like at a 30% margin because anybody could copy hardware because uh, with software, when you ship something, the person does not have your code. Your code still resides on your server, right? And most of the times. But then hardware, you actually give the thing. So which means that it was very easy for someone to actually open it up and copy and reverse engineer. So you have to have file like a lot of patents to protect it because otherwise you'll never do it. But then every 18 months, it will get old. Uh, all our software folks basically we try to ship a release every 1 or 2 weeks, and then it continuously gets better and better. But in hardware you cannot have a new version, so you basically wait for 18 months for the thing to get old and then ship a new version. In this process, what used to happen is the person who had the best manufacturing capabilities, the best distribution, or the best relationship with manufacturers always won because they always could negotiate better prices, sell at a higher margin or lower cost. And that's why China always won because they had the best scale, they had the lowest manufacturing cost, and there was nothing else to play with. So anybody in the world who made innovative hardware, they just took it, copied it, because patent laws don't, are not completely worth their salt, and they just shipped it. But today's hardware is different. And let me give you some examples. We have Kindle. Kindle is a hardware product. But technically, hardware is just an enabler to read digital books or digital content. Nobody's buys Kindle for a hardware product itself. They buy Kindle because they can read books here. Now, Kindle does not make any money on the hardware. So there is no question of competing on price or making in China or who makes it the lowest cost. Kindle exists because it has the biggest catalog of books, right? So Amazon does not make any money on actually shipping the Kindle products, but they make money as a recurring revenue where a user keeps on buying books over time. And that's where most of the money is. And it's extremely defensible because you can keep using the Kindle for 5+ years by keeping on downloading new books, which is essentially a way to upgrade its functionality. And still you have a great experience, and you keep giving Amazon recurring money, and it's extremely difficult for anybody to dismantle. Even if they have a reader as good as Kindle, they would not have the books collection. Take a even more simpler product that you would think as a purely hardware. So there's something called DropCam. DropCam is a connected home security camera. So you buy the camera at $200, but a camera that is on 24/7 generates a lot of video data, right? And you have to keep storing it. So actually the majority of the money that DropCam makes comes from video storage, because once people buy it, most of them actually subscribe for a video storage plan, which is $10 a month. And now if you buy a camera and you use it for like 2 years, you're going to pay $240 in video storage to DropCam, which is more than the camera, but then there's no manufacturing cost involved there. So actually most of the money that DropCam makes comes from the storage subscription plan. Inito, which is our company. So Inito basically is a small device that plugs onto your phone and lets you do dozens of diagnostic tests right on your phone using a device and test strips. So user buy it for the device and the test strips, but then they need to keep taking tests again and again. You sell the reader for cheap, but then you make a huge margin on the test strips, and then the user keeps taking the test, which is recurring revenue forever. But more importantly, we get health data about the user's body, live online, right? And which basically means that we can build services layer on top of it. We give data analytics. We build like an analytics layer that tells you if something is wrong, and that is the lock. So really, users are buying it to get healthier, but the hardware is just an enabler to do that. So the other point is, how do you? So this is just about the product, right? Just a second. So I think something got it. So essentially, the modern hardware is really a Trojan horse for software. Hardware is just the enabler, whereas software is what powers the whole thing, right? And it has advantages way more than you think, because hardware is a one-time sale versus connected hardware is a recurring revenue. Your margins are super high because nobody can copy. It's much harder to copy the services and the software business than actually just the widget itself, because once you give the hardware to someone, they can copy, but your code is protected. Turns out you don't need a new version 18 months because your software keeps getting upgraded every month, if not every week. And that keeps on getting the functionality. So the reason I wanted to talk about hardware in a hackathon is because a modern hardware company is actually a software company, with hardware just being the enabler of software. Hardware also has some unique challenges with itself, which is, where do you sell hardware? A while ago, most of the hardware was sold in places like these, which means that you needed to have a distribution network, and also the person with the largest distribution network won, because it's not easy to be in every store and manage retail and stuff like that. So it is tremendously difficult for a startup to actually be in retail, because these guys also pay you like 60 days later, and so you basically have to buy inventory, but then you cannot, uh, you're not going to receive payments like a digital product, etc. But today hardware is sold on Amazon or on your website. The distribution has changed, which means that selling hardware is not a problem. If you build something that is valuable and your consumers like, consumers will pay for it and you get paid for it immediately, just like any software product does. So if you are a SaaS company or any other software company, you build a product that consumers want, you sell it on your website or any other place online, and you get paid right then. It was not the case with hardware, but it is the case now, which means that a small startup like us can actually not just build hardware, but also can sell it. There are still challenging elements in hardware. Hardware is pretty hard to finance. And why is it hard to finance is because you need more capital upfront, because building hardware takes a lot more time. Uh, as I said, a hardware is a software company in itself, which means that you both need hardware skills, which is also multidisciplinary manufacturing skills, but also as much software engineering that any software company would have. So, so really, you're talking about a much bigger initial team with a much longer manufacturing cycle. And hardware production takes time, which means that you have to buy stuff in bulk and then manufacture it, and then only you can sell it, right? Uh, Now, why is this hard? Because a traditional VC firm operates in like a 5-year cycle. They take money from their limited partners, and then they invest it in startups like us or Headout, and then they basically have to raise more money and next year, but they really have 3 years to show a fast growth to their partners, right? Uh, Deep tech hardware, or mostly any hardware, takes time, right? Which means that in 3 years you are not growing super fast. It is going to take you more time, and which means that it is not the completely suited investment from a VC perspective. And what we found a lot of success is in raising money from passionate angels or people who had exits across the world. And financing does not come in one go, so we have to keep raising for the next milestone and then go to the next milestone, etc. Just because the traditional VC model is not completely suited for hardware. So financing a hardware company is extremely hard, but it is changing because every fund right now has a hardware arm, right? And they are very keen on making investments. So the question is, who does a software company hire? So if you look at it traditionally, even a company like Apple, most of the engineering hires were actually software engineering, or not was actually hardware engineering, right? They hired people in mechanical engineering, they hired people in, you know, electronics and design, industrial design, and so on, right? Even a company which is like very hardcore hardware like Apple. But this has changed since last year. Apple hires more software engineers than hardware engineers, uh, because the software, or the iOS, and also the integration with Mac, etc., is what holds people on the Apple platform. Their hardware sells. While they make most of the money on hardware, the hardware sells because of the software they make, and how it, and software and services, and the App Store, and how that locks users to always there. Changing from my iPhone is not a problem that nobody else make a good piece of hardware. It's because nobody makes the whole ecosystem, which includes the App Store, the iOS, and the integrations with Mac, not as good. And all that is like software. So And the only thing common between Apple and Google is probably that they hire most software engineers. So, and the same is true for Fitbit and Oculus and so on. All of them hire more software engineers than hardware engineers. So, so I think we have all the key elements now in place, which basically is that we could never compete with China on building cheaper products that had the widest distribution network because it was just a mass manufacturing game and China had the best manufacturing abilities. Today's hardware is different. It is smart and it is software. And we believe that because the new hardware is different, we have a much better shot at building hardware than anyone else. And historically, there's never been a better time to build hardware companies from India because it is smart now. So I think with that, I will just ask one question to the audience. So while we have already determined that Apple hires the most amount of software engineers, can someone tell me which is the most paid stream in Apple, in product, across product engineering, etc.? Who gets paid the most?
Oh, that's a super uh, curious question you asked. Let's have it, folks. Let's have it in the chat. Who do you think gets paid the most? What position in a product company is paid the highest? I believe you're limiting this to engineering, right?
Engineering, product, design. So basically, across product roles, essentially people who are directly working on the product.
Let's have it, folks. Let's have it. Start your guesses. Time starts now. Shivant says CTO.
No, we are talking about at people at the same level. So Rachit says CXOs, which is obviously true for every company. There's nothing. Okay, guys, so let me give the options. So hardware engineering, software engineering, uh, and design. Who gets paid more?
Let's have it, folks. It's a 33% chance of getting the answer right amongst the three options. I think the general consensus is that software engineering gets paid more than design. Man,
Okay,
I'm reconsidering my career choices, man.
Okay, anyone else who has a different opinion? Okay, maybe I'll give it out. It's design. Nobody gets paid more in Apple than design.
I am super happy with that. Thank you so much, Ayush.
Yeah. So you should, Siddharth, you should not change your profession if you're a designer. And
yes.
yeah. So yeah, I think nobody gets a prize.
Nobody gets a prize. Superb, awesome.
Only Siddharth gets a prize, I think. So anyways, thanks a lot, guys, for giving the opportunity, and let's build great hardware from India.
Yes, thank you so much, Ayush, for coming on. We'll see you at the AMA session later at 2 p.m., which will happen on Discord. And yeah, thanks for coming on, man. See you soon.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Well, folks, it it looks like I'm going to be paid the most really soon. So looking forward to that. Vikram, take notes. Varun, take notes. Our next speaker, swiftly moving on, is Swati Karkala. She's the CTO at Script. Swati, if you can hear us, say hi. Turn on your video so we can see you.
Hi, how are you?
Awesome, awesome. Yes, we can see you. Hi, Swati.
Great.
What's up? How's the day gone so far?
Day's gone great. I can't wait to get started.
Awesome, awesome, cool. So, folks, for those of you who don't know, Swati helped found actually the company known as Script, and it's a tech business that focuses on AI and design. She actually started it during her college days and has grown it since then on purely customer profits. This has not been funded externally. She has been at coding since she was 15 and is an active open source contributor and a guest author for multiple companies like Sumo Logic, Stack Overflow, and Active State. She wants to get more women in the coding side of technology, and she currently runs the Women Tech Maker program in collaboration with Google to make that reality. Swati, thank you so much for coming on, and I'm very excited to see what you show us today. And yeah, the stage is all yours. Let's get started.
Awesome. I hope everyone's doing well. Just gonna share my screen. We'll get started. Okay. I suppose you can see my screen, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. So thanks, guys, again for coming here for my talk. So what I'm going to be talking about is building real-time applications with the Phoenix Web Framework. So this is basically going to cover how to build real-time concurrent applications for the web without JavaScript. Now, this part is what excites me the most because I'm a true-blood, true-born backend engineer. I cannot do anything, or actually don't want to do anything that involves front-end like JavaScript design. That's a hard no for me. I love backend code, working with the terminal, infrastructure, all of these things. So when I learned about the Phoenix Web Framework, I was super happy because it allows me to build real-time applications without using JavaScript. Because until then, typically if you wanted to build like real-time applications, like whether it's a notification channel or some sort of real-time updating graphs, you would need to use WebSockets, JavaScript, the whole shebang, right? But with Phoenix, you don't have to do that. All right, so here's a little plan of how we're going to get structure this. So I'll be first introducing you to something called Elixir. I hope you guys have heard of it. If not, it's okay. We will then be covering what are WebSockets and how that's used to build real-time applications. Finally, the Phoenix Web Framework. And then we'll just go down a little bit under the hood, see what it is about Elixir and Phoenix that allows us to do this without JavaScript. A little bit of demo, and hopefully, maybe the coronavirus will end. We'll see. All right, so who am I? I'm the CTO and co-founder at Script. We're a technology company building solutions in AI, blockchain, automation, everything under the hood. I'm also a guest author. I write for companies like Sauce Labs, Zendesk, Stack Overflow, all of these great companies. I'm also a Ruby on Rails contributor, an open source contributor, and I absolutely love yoga. So that's me, and let's get started. All right, so all of you guys must be on Discord by now, right? If not, I hope you are. It's a chat application that a lot of gamers use, and now they are transitioning into other sectors as well. So Discord recently crossed more than 12 million concurrent users. So that's basically 12 million people on their application using it concurrently every single second, right? And they serve over 26 million WebSocket events to clients per second, right? This is crazy. This is crazy infrastructure that's just scaled to the limits. And Elixir is powering all of this. So Elixir is basically what the Phoenix Web Framework that I'll be showing you is written on. Yeah. All right. Another thing, WhatsApp. Yeah, believe it or not, WhatsApp uses Elixir to send push notifications and to send messages between clients, right? So WhatsApp, as we know, is a peer-to-peer application. There is no central repository or central database where the messages are stored, but rather they're passed in between. So Elixir powers WhatsApp as well. And it's so great because they need only 50 engineers for its 900 million and more probably by the end of this talk users. That's a little bit about Elixir, the language that powers the Phoenix web framework. All right. Okay, so now we have Phoenix, you've got Elixir. What is Erlang? All right, so Erlang is basically your one of the most primitive languages that is, that Elixir kind of wraps itself around, right? So Elixir is kind of like a 2020 version or a 2000 version of Erlang. So Erlang is a language that was created in the 80s by the team of engineers at Ericsson to power the telecom industry, right? So Elixir is kind of like the 2020 version or the 2000 version of this. It's like a wrapper. That's what Elixir is. And then Phoenix is built on top of that. So Joe Armstrong, the creator of Erlang, his thought process behind building this entire language was let it crash, right? So a lot of languages and a lot of our thinking, a lot of our, the way that we work, right? It's around how do I prevent things from happening, right? This is essentially why you write test cases, why you prevent bugs from happening, check, double check, all of these things. That's one way. The other way is let it. So let's not allow problems to wreck our whole application, okay? So that's the kind of principle behind Erlang, Elixir, and then essentially Phoenix. Remember this because this is kind of what is the basis of the framework itself. All right, so Erlang, back to Erlang. So like I told you, it's kind of the primitive language. So Erlang is a product of the 80s. Engineers at Ericsson developed this language to power high-speed phone networks. Yes, the 80s, right? So it is distributed, it's fault tolerant, because have you ever heard landlines crashing? No, never. The world might, might catch on fire. There might be earthquakes, all of this, but then your landline, if you pick it up, it's gonna work. It's real time. Second, you say hi, millions of miles around the globe, and someone else can hear that as well. It's highly available. Again, it never crashes. It's always there for you. And it's hot swapping. Believe it or not, phone networks actually get software updates as well. But you never have to wait for it to update before you can start using your phone again. So all of this is powered because of the language called Erlang. And right now, it is so relevant because any applications that we use, right, it needs to be quick, really, really quick, right? Our attention spans are milliseconds right now, thanks to TikTok, thanks to Instagram Reels and whatnot, right? So it's more relevant than ever, Erlang, Elixir, and Phoenix. Let's see how it gets started. All right, so back to Elixir. So the 2000 version of Erlang. Why it's so great for web services for now is that it's compiled. It's a compiled language, so you essentially get bytecode out of it. Compile once, run multiple times, like Java, but much better. It's concurrent. So they're basically lightweight threads that can run at near real time, almost parallel, not really parallel, and they're managed by the Beam VM. We'll get more into this as we go on. And finally, it's distributed, right? Think about WhatsApp, why it's so great, because there's no centralized repository, right? It's a peer-to-peer network, it's distributed. And that's essentially why you're able to get all of these features with the Phoenix Web Framework, because the core, the fundamental language that it's built on is so amazing. Okay, all right. Now that we got that out of the way, let's look at how a typical web request is played out in the real world. So you have your server, you visit a website, type it up on your Chrome or Safari, whatever, google.com. It makes a request to the server, right? Of course, there's DNS and all of this that it goes through, finally finds the server, makes a request, and the server responds. So that's a very simple sort of web request, right? This is great. This works fantastic for most of our applications, but there are times where you need notifications, right? Like someone posted something new and you want to get notified on your web, on your mobile, whatever. Or you are watching the US elections right now. You don't want to refresh your page, right, to see who won. You want to see it in real time. It has to happen. The page has to basically refresh and get the latest data as it's happening without you requiring to reload or rather make a request to the server again. So how does this happen? It happens with something called WebSockets. Okay. So with the real-time programming or real-time web application, what you essentially have is a server client, and in between you have something called the WebSocket service, right? There's a lot of services that you can use. Pusher is one great application that you can use to provide WebSockets. You can also host your own. Always better to go with something that is just already hosted. So what it essentially does is that it's not a request response prototype. It's rather a subscribe and publish, right? Or publish and subscribe, PubSub. It's a PubSub service, right? And what the server essentially does is that when it gets new information, whether something gets updated in the database, it receives some sort of event, this is then taken and then pushed to the client, right? The client no longer needs to request, the server rather pushes. So this is something that's known as a PubSub. Okay, so far so good. All right. So let me move into a little bit of demo. So, all right, so I was talking to you about WebSockets, right? And how you can use a service called Pusher. So Pusher is a WebSocket service. So it essentially acts as a middle layer between your server and your client. This is where the client can subscribe to. And if there's any new events, it will then display it on the screen, right? Without the client having to request. That's essentially what Pusher does. Right, so let's see how it works, and then let's see how the Phoenix Web Framework takes care of this. All right, so it's quite simple. I hope all of you guys are a little familiar with JavaScript. So basically you install it, you install the package, and then you initialize the service. Pusher gives you an API key, and then you just basically initialize it. Then what you do is subscribe, right? So this is essentially that the client subscribing to a channel on the WebSocket service. Okay, so for demo purposes, the channel is called My Channel. Okay, and then what happens is that the server is also subscribed to this channel. And then on your client, you will listen to any events that are pushed to your channel. Okay, so basically you will ask your client to bind to this event, to any sort of event that's triggered on the channel. And once there's a new sort of data or a new message that's waiting for it, the client will then do the required functionality. Okay, so this is essentially how it works. It will subscribe to a WebSocket service. It will listen for events, and when an event is there, it will then publish that event. Okay. All right. So how does this look in the real world? So basically, I'm just going to take you through the Pusher application, how JavaScript does it, and then we'll look at how Phoenix does it, right? So you have this graph over here. It's updating in real time. I am not reloading the screen. If you do an inspect element, you will see that, this is a video. All right, well, demo failed, but anyway, this is essentially what you're supposed to see, a graph being rendered on the screen, new data coming in, and the graph being re-rendered for every new data, right? So what you'll essentially do is first figure out where the chart is, because you need to update that HTML element. You will then bind, or you will then initiate your Pusher variable. You will then subscribe to the price. In this case, it is a Bitcoin USD price difference. You will listen to any new prices, and if there is a new price, you will then redraw your chart. Okay, quite simple. You figure out the element, you subscribe, you listen for new events, and then you update, right? Quite simple, yes, but this is a simple example. The problem is, as this grows, right, you're going to have a lot of business logic that happens right here. And, this is not fun to be in this space right here, right? Imagine all your business logic just being squished in over here. You will need to figure out so many different HTML elements to update, figure out what page you're on, see if match is, certain conditions, all of these things. Now, as you scale, this is going to get quite hard. And this is why building real-time applications isn't that easy, okay? All right, so now let's look at how the Phoenix Web Framework does this. Okay, this is the Phoenix Web Framework. I am on this route called bank, right? So I'm going to click on deposit, and you can see that it updates on the screen without the need to reload. I am then going to invest. Yeah, I'm just going to click, and then yeah, it's growing. Spend, burn, great. So what's so great about it? It's just basically clicking a button, right? Okay, so what's pretty great about this is that the page doesn't reload, first of all. And then what you'll also see is that the page is not re-rendered, right? It's not that it's re-rendering the page, rather it's computing a delta of the changes that need to be displayed, and it is only re-rendering that delta, right? It's not refreshing the entire page. So when you deposit, you can see over here that it turned 10, right? Then let me also show you the buttons that are involved here. So you'll see this special hook right here called the PHX click or the Phoenix click, right? So this is a live view element. So Phoenix live views are what enables us to build real-time applications without the need for JavaScript. So a live view element, one of them is called the Phoenix click. What this does is that it makes an AJAX call to your service or to your server, and then it returns back and updates the front end essentially, right? So when I click on, let's say, invest, you can see that the page is not rendered, rather only very minute changes or the delta is being rendered again. Then you click on spend, invest, all that stuff. Cool, I hope you're with me. All right, let's look at how the code looks, right? So this is what a Phoenix application looks like. These are Elixir files. You can see that the language is pretty easy to understand. It does not look like a language from the 80s. This is because I told you that Elixir is a wrapper for the Erlang programming language, right? Okay, so it looks quite similar to Ruby because the creators of Elixir were actually previously Ruby developers. So they brought that really nice stuff into Elixir. So EXS files are essentially Elixir files. Okay, so let's look at the router. So the router basically is, just where you define your endpoints for a web application, right? So you have things like get, put, post, all of these HTTP methods, right? Phoenix introduces this very nice, it's not a HTTP method, rather it's a function that, essentially abstracts the kind of, let's say the magic behind the screen, right? With this function called live. So when you call this, you can then bind a endpoint to a module within Phoenix, right? So I'm going to call it /bank. And you can see over here that this is /bank. It is then tied to something called bank live. Let's see what bank live looks like. All right. So this is what it looks like. We are essentially using is basically like import or includes that you would use in JavaScript or Python, whatever, right? It's like a module. So you are importing that, you're using that. Why I say using is because Elixir is not an object-oriented language. It's rather a functional programming language. So you cannot import things. You can only kind of use the module over here, right? So you're using it over here called the live view. There's certain functions that we will look into now. Let's ignore that one. And then this one, okay? So let's see mount and basically event, all right? So mount basically triggers when the page is first loaded, right? So let's just say hi there. Let's reload this and we will get hi here or hi there, right? There's a couple of things that you'll see over here, basically. The first thing that you will see that's being rendered on the page is the CSS and the JavaScript, right? So under the hood, you are still using certain JavaScript, bind, subscribe, publish, all of these functions, but they're kind of abstracted, right? You also get CSRF token just to kind of validate what you are. And then you can also see that it's connected to the Phoenix WebSocket, right? So that's essentially how it's working. Now, when you click, all right, so let me show you the HTTP or the HTML file. Very simple. You have the Phoenix click here. It calls a function called deposit, spend, invest, burn, all of these things. You also have certain variables. For us, it's just the money. So it just shows you what your bank account contains right now, and then grows the money accordingly, right? So when you click on this, what essentially happens is that this gets sent back to the server. Deposit, it's going to look where is deposit. It's right here. And what it's going to do is just going to kick you off a little bit and give you about 10 rupees. Yeah. And then when you invest, it's just going to add 10 rupees. So I am going to read from the socket, the web socket, what is the value of money, and I'm going to increment it by 10. Or then if I'm going to spend it, I'm going to decrement it by 10. Cool. So deposit, spend, deposit, invest, 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 spend, spend, spend. All right, great. So what's so great about this? Yes, it's real time, but let's take it up a notch. When I do this, right? Let's restart again, both of them are 0. When I click on this is not starting, right? So what's the point, right? If I, communicate over here, I need it to be reflected over here, right? That's essentially what a real-time application is. That's why you're able to see the US election results on your website, right? Without reloading, refreshing. Okay. So what we've essentially done here is we have subscribed over here because we've mounted and we've subscribed to the socket and we're listening to it. But what we're not doing is once we click on this button, we're only focusing on updating what's on the screen. We're not sending it to all the other clients who have also subscribed to this page. Let's see how to do that. Okay, I'm just gonna copy some of the code that I already have over here. Okay, and this is a hot reload, so you don't have to reload your page. The code is already re-rendered. All right, so let's see. Oh my God, when I click on here, it comes over here. Invest, invest, spend, spend, spend. But how did this happen? Okay. Okay, so basically what I'm doing is that every single time the live view mounts on the screen, I am subscribing all clients to something called HDFC. This is essentially your channel name. Okay, and then what I do is when anything is clicked, I can basically click here and then click here also, right? It's both ways. What happens is that when I click on the event, it just doesn't, it doesn't only update what's on the screen, it also does a broadcast, right? So it publishes out to all the other clients that are listening on this particular channel. It says, hey, the value of money right now is 10. And then essentially what happens when you invest is that you get new money, you add it to 10, and then you update it. Cool, makes sense? Can't burn, very simple. Right, all of this, deposit, simple. And all of this is done without writing a single line of JavaScript, right? Okay, cool. So now that we know how it works, why is, Elixir basically the only kind of language that can do this, right? Why can't I do this with, let's say, Python or JavaScript, Ruby, Java? If anyone develops in Java, why can't I do this, right? This is essentially boils down to how Erlang was built from ground up, right? So let's rewind a bit. Let's go back to what Joe Armstrong said, right? Let it crash, okay? And also let's also see the other kind of aspects of the Erlang language. It's fault tolerant, like I said. If something happens, or let's rewind a bit. So we're all talking on the landline phone. If one person faces a bug, it doesn't reflect across every single phone network, right? All of them don't crash. Only whatever is related to that crash goes down, right? And you're able to also quickly fix that code and publish it live without things going down. You'd have seen this because as you're talking, the phone networks would have gotten updated, but you never see it getting updated, right? It's because of languages like Erlang. Let's see what's so great about it, right? Okay, so one of the things, how many minutes do I have? Okay, about 10 minutes. Let's get through this really quick. All right, so one of the great things about Erlang is that it's sitting on top of something called Beam, right? So Beam is the virtual machine. Very similar, but very, very different to the Java virtual machine, because this is also a compiled language. But the purpose of the Java virtual machine is that it runs in every single place possible, right? But the purpose of the Beam virtual machine is that it enables concurrency, right? It enables you to scale horizontally. So what this means is that you're able to utilize all the resources within a machine versus scaling vertically, where you just keep adding new machines, right? You're able to do that. That is because of the Beam virtual machine. Another reason is something called the actor model, right? So this is a type of concurrent model. There's multiple things. I think probably you guys would have studied something about shared memory, semaphores, all of this in C, right? So in C, basically what's there is that there is one memory space that's accessible to all sort of processes. And when one process writes to it, the others only can read, right? That's essentially what a lock is. So that's called the shared model concurrent, that's a shared memory model for the concurrent processes, right? What Elixir uses is the actor model. We'll get into that. It's also distributed because you can scale horizontally versus vertically, and it's also fault tolerant, right? All of these make it great for building real-time applications. Okay. Let's just go back a little bit, a couple of years back to when you guys were maybe in first, second year. So what is an OS process, right? It's just probably a unit of execution, right? It's got a stack, heap, blocks of memory, registers, all of this. So this is a process, and when it gets executed on the CPU, you call it a thread of execution. So you'd have learned about different models of the CPU processing, right? Round robin, parallel, sequential, concurrent, all of these things. Now, what Elixir is great at is concurrent processing. All right, back to the Beam. So the Beam virtual machine, what it does is that I was telling you that it allows you to scale horizontally, right? So you've got multiple cores on your system. Generally, what a language is able to do is access only one core, right? If you want to do multi-core processing, you need to put a little bit of more energy into it. But because Erlang and Elixir is at the core very distributed, it is able to scale across all of these cores. And then all of the processes that Elixir creates is actually managed by the Beam VM, right? It is not managed by your CPU, it's managed by the Beam VM. This is because Elixir processes are very, very lightweight, okay? Just keep this in mind. I'll tell you why it's relevant later on. Concurrency, if you guys are not sure, basically what this is very, very fast process switching, right? It looks real time, but it's not. It looks parallel, but it's not. It's just that it's really, really fast at switching, right? So it processes thread one again, thread 2 3 times, and then back to thread 1 again, okay? The switching is so fast that it looks real time, but it really isn't, right? This is what concurrency is. Okay, so back to what makes Elixir so great. So what Elixir does is that it follows the actor model for concurrency. So what it basically does is that each process is individual, first thing. It is tied inside its own box, and the only way one process can talk to another is by passing messages to it, okay? This is so much better than the shared memory, because as you guys would have read in C, if you have shared memory, you need locks. And if you have locks, you will face deadlocks, right? At some point of time, your system will crash. Everything is trying to access one thing, it's locked, and the entire system crashes, right? This is why Elixir is fault tolerant, because it doesn't follow that. Rather, each process is independent and it sends messages. When it sends messages, if one process fails, only that process fails. It doesn't affect anything else, okay? All right, basically actor model, what you can do is create processes, you can send messages, you can also designate. Basically, each process can manage its own state, okay? There's a bunch of stuff, I'm not gonna get into it because we don't have time. All right, 5 more minutes, okay. So why is this so important, right? The key factor here is that you're able to build real-time applications with languages like Elixir, and probably only Elixir, because of how lightweight each process is, right? On a typical server that runs, let's say, Django, like Python or Ruby, all of these servers, what you can do is only scale to a certain extent, right? This is because their interpreted language is not compiled. They can only scale to certain limits. But since Elixir has lightweight processes, you can run millions and millions and millions of processes. The system will not crash. The system will still scale for you. It will not be slow. Because of this, you are able to build real-time applications without JavaScript, right? What happens is that if there's any sort of new information in the server, Elixir is able to spawn thousands of processes to reach all of the clients, send the message, and come back. You do not need an external service. This is essentially why it's so great, right? Okay, we've got a couple more minutes left. So let me show you how it works. All right. So let's look at, okay, I am logging into the Elixir shell. You can see that this actually renders Erlang. This is very lightweight, it's a wrapper, right? So this is interactive Elixir. Let's see how we can do something. I'm just going to show you a very, very, very simple process that shows off how easy it is to build processes and run concurrent processes, okay? I have a function called sum, which basically you send like a number to it and it will keep on adding it, right? That's all it is. So let's send it. Let's say we'll send 5, okay? Adding 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The answer is 15. Great. Now let's send 15. Then let's send 20. All right. So you can see concurrency happening here, right? It does 155, the PID, the process ID, then it processes 157. Okay, so you can see that even for something as small as this, Elixir, how it works is that it sends out every single execution is wrapped inside its own process. This is what makes it great. It's fault tolerant, very, very small processes. Okay, let's see how it is fault tolerant right now. Let's say whenever you send a, let's not say 3, let's say maybe 7. Okay, whenever you send a 7, it is going to crash. Okay. So let me just log out of the shell, come back in. Yeah, since it's a compiled language, this is what's great about it. It will tell you that it's going to fail. I know we want it to fail. So let's send, let's say 5. If we send 5, it is not going to crash because there's no 7 inside it, right? All good. Now let's say we want to send 10 to it. Okay. Crash. But see, it's not a problem. My shell is still active. I can still do something in the shell because only this process has crashed and not my entire process, right? So let's say that I want to do 10. Okay, let's say I want to do 6 and then I want to process 10, okay? 10 is going to crash, but you will see 6 still continues, right? So the total is 21. So even if one process crashes, the others don't get affected. Because of all of this, you are able to basically create real-time applications with Phoenix without the need of JavaScript. You do not need that middle layer. You do not need a pub/sub network. You do not need a WebSocket service because everything is handled by the server itself, right? Every single time there's a new sort of event that you want to publish, the server can take care of it. You do not need a separate service. The server doesn't need to send it, and JavaScript doesn't need to take it. The server can handle it all. Right? And this is essentially how you build real-time applications with the Phoenix Web Framework. All right. Thanks, guys. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for the demonstration, Swati. Super fun to see. I am excited for what people ask you in the Discord AMA. I have some questions myself already, but I'll reserve them for Discord. Thank you for taking.
Do you want me to log into Discord? And
Yes, please. If you
yeah.
haven't already, we're going to have an AMA
Yeah.
session.
Okay. Sure, sounds good. Great.
Awesome. Thank you all for joining in, guys. I hope it was fun. And I hope your hacks are coming along on a pace that's not all too uncomfortable, because you have just today and tomorrow, and we have the final review session on Sunday. So yeah, best of luck for your hacks. Thank you so much once again, Swati, for taking out the time. We'll see you at Discord.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, see you. All right, folks, that was it. Thank you so much for tuning into the part one and the speaker session one of day 2 for Hackout. And we'll be back in the evening with even more speakers for you. And best of luck with your hacks. Until next time, I hope I've been a good enough host. Assuming King Sid will be back in the evening to take over, and you'll get to see him again. Cheers, folks, and I hope you enjoyed. Do like, do comment, do subscribe to the Hackout channel, because we have tons of more content planned for you, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.